Welcome to the meeting of the New York State Bar Association's 2023 membership meeting. It's our annual meeting, and it's a pleasure to see you all here in New York City, back at the Hilton, after a 3-year hiatus. So congratulations and welcome. I am now going to call the meeting to order. And introduce the New York State Court System's Color Guard.
Ready, fix.
I pledge allegiance States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, on. Right, face. Forward, march.
Thank you. You may be seated. We now move to item 2 on the agenda, approval of the minutes of the January 22nd, 2022 annual meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. We will now move to item number 3 on the agenda, report of the Nominating Committee and election of the elected delegates to the House of Delegates. Article 11 of the Bylaws requires that the elected delegates to the House of Delegates shall be elected at the annual meeting. You should indicate that the Nominating Committee has filed a report containing the requisite nominations. The list of candidates for the office of the elected delegate from each of the 13 judicial districts has been distributed to the House members. Sharon Gersman, past president of the New York State Bar Association and member at large of the Nominating Committee, will present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the Nominating Committee, I submit the following nominations for elected delegates to the House of Delegates. From the 1st District, James B. Kobeck, Stephen Charles Lessard, Diana S. Sen, all of New York City. From the 2nd District, the Honorable Barry Kamens, Amy Richter, Anthony Vaughn, all of Brooklyn. From the 3rd District, Mara Afzali, Hermes Fernandez, and Colleen R. Pearson, all of Albany. From the 4th District, Mary Elizabeth Correno, Margaret E. Gilmartin, Connor Reel, all from Saratoga Springs. From the 5th District, Stuart LaRose from Syracuse, John T. McCann from Syracuse, and Jean Marie Westlake from East Syracuse. From the 6th District, Alyssa M. Barraro from Binghamton, Jerry Ann Duval from Cortland, Rachel Ellen Miller from Binghamton. In the 7th District, Duane T. Basco from Penfield, Stephen M. Kelly from Geneseo, Amy Schwartz Wallace from Rochester. In the 8th District, Norman P. Effman from Warsaw, Sophie I. Field from Buffalo, and Leah Nowatarski from Warsaw. In the 9th District, Claire J. Degnan, Honorable Linda S. Jameson, and John A. Papalardo, all of White Plains. In the 10th District, Harvey B. Basunder, Islandia, Justin M. Block from Central Islip, and Peter H. Levy from Jericho. In the 11th District, the Honorable Karina E. Alamar of Kew Gardens, Kristen J. Dubowski of Queens, and Arthur N. Terranova of Queens. In the 12th District, Samuel Braverman, Renee Corley Hill, and Stephen E. Milan, all of the Bronx. In the 3rd District, Alan J. Crawford, the Honorable Edwina Francis Martin, and Sheila T. McGinn, all of Staten Island. This concludes my report on behalf of the Nominating Committee.
Is there a motion to close the nominations?
I move to close the nominations.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you.
Madam President, I'd like to now move that a single unanimous ballot be cast by the Secretary for the election of the elected delegate nominees to the House of Delegates.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. We now move to item 4 on the agenda, the report of the President. That would be me. I am very pleased to be back here in New York City for our annual meeting. It is wonderful to be together again. This is our 146th annual meeting. Hundreds of lawyers, thousands, from across the state, nation, and world are gathered here for this cherished week, devoted to the celebration of law and the legal profession. After 3 years of anxiety, uncertainty, and disruption, it is good to be home. While it has been several years since we were together for our last annual meeting in New York City, we have been busy and as productive as ever. Our sections and committees are meeting in person again, reestablishing old relationships and forming new ones. We have had several successful destination meetings and events. Moving forward, we are working hard to find the proper balance needed to incorporate the new virtual tools that we learned during the pandemic while recognizing the importance of in-person collaboration. I am pleased to report that our membership numbers remain steady as we have actively pursued the best ways to engage with new members and retain existing ones. To grow as an association, we must stay relevant, embrace new technologies, new issues, and work together to help our membership be the best that they can be for their clients and for the legal community. We also strive to make optimal use of the association's resources to reach our members and prospective members across the state, the nation, and the world. And we continue to live in unprecedented times. And legal and constitutional processes that have been in place for many years are being questioned. Yesterday, the Executive Committee adopted the following resolution. The New York State Bar Association Executive Committee approves the appointment of a special committee on the selection of judges for the Court of Appeals in response to concerns raised in the recent weeks over the appointment of our Chief Judge. The committee will examine the selection process, including its history, and make recommendations to the association. The Executive Committee reaffirmed that the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary are crucial to the administration of justice. It is of the utmost importance to public confidence that there is a fair process that allows the judiciary to operate independently and effectively. There is a dire need to ensure the functionality of our system of government and the protection of our constitutional rights. As lawyers, preservation of the rule of law is front and center as a core duty of our profession. In that light, I am justly proud of the efforts within our association. Last November, the House of Delegates adopted a historic resolution from the Women in the Law Section in support of reproductive rights and the New York State Equal Rights Amendment. The House of Delegates also adopted a major report from the President's Committee on Access to Justice and the Committee on Legal Aid on access to justice during the COVID-19 pandemic. And later today, the House of Delegates will consider a resolution from the LGBTQ Law Section in support of the New York State Unified Court System's UCS bench card and best practices for judges using LGBTQ+ inclusive language and pronouns. I hope, if adopted by the House, the bench card will serve as a template for similar efforts nationwide. Our global presence allows us to take a leading role in the worldwide struggle to protect and defend the rule of law. Led by our international section, we continue to support and assist the people of Ukraine through engagement with the Ukrainian Bar Association, the American Bar Association, and other stakeholders committed to the international rule of law. I have traveled locally, nationally, and internationally to raise awareness about our great association and offer our continued partnership and support to bar associations across the state, nation, and world. To that end, I have signed memorandums of understanding with the Law Society of England and Wales, the Law Society of Scotland, the Bar Council of England and Wales, the Serbian Bar Association, the Puerto Rico Bar Association, Colegio de Abogados y Abogadas de Puerto Rico, and reaffirmed our partnerships and memorandum of understanding with the Virgin Islands Bar Association. I have attended opening of the legal year in England and Wales and developed relationships with bar leaders worldwide. Worldwide associations and legal communities look to New York for guidance and collaboration. The New York State Bar Association members come from across the world, and we will continue to ensure that attorneys feel at home in our association, no matter where they may practice or reside. I have established 5 presidential task forces at the start of my term on June 1st of last year. And the motto for my presidency has been investing in the future of our profession. These task forces follow in that suit. I am proud to report that all 5 groups quickly sprang into action, producing programs, drafting reports with legal and policy recommendations, publishing articles, and educating and informing our members on developments in the law. The Task Force on Mental Health and Trauma-Informed Representation, their name was changed at their request, has identified a need for more access to community-based care and diversion of people living with mental illness from prisons and jails. Further, we as leaders of the bench and bar must better support our clients with mental health and our well-being needs, and our attorneys who work with people living with mental illness need support as well. The Presidential Summit on Wednesday addressed these issues and discussed how attorneys can better support themselves and our clients living with mental illness and trauma. I am extremely proud that the New York State Bar Association is leading by example here. The January-February issue of the New York State Bar Association Journal focuses on the intersection of mental health and the legal system, with thoughtful articles on criminal justice considerations, disability law, and well-being. And as I mentioned, the theme of the Presidential Summit was mental health in the justice system, impacts, challenges, and potential solutions. It was a great privilege to see so many of my colleagues in attendance for what was truly a candid and necessary conversation on the cruel intersection between the mental health crisis and our civil and criminal justice systems. Last week, Governor Hochul, in her State of the State address, announced a proposal to invest $1 billion in mental health care. This proposal is welcomed news and will do much to remedy the severe lack of treatment options for New Yorkers living with mental illness who need compassionate care. Governor Hochul also announced the increase in beds for people living with mental illness and an increase in transitional supportive housing. The task force on the U.S. territories quickly sprang into action last summer, drafting a resolution that the New York State Bar Association and the American Bar Association's House of Delegates soon adopted, calling for the insular cases to be overturned. Unfortunately, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear the case of Fitzsimonu v. United States the last fall. And despite this disappointment, the task force's good work will continue to ensure that all United States citizens have equality and equal rights. I look forward to continuing work with the task force on these incredibly important issues. The Fitzsimonu case brought forth the question of birthright citizenship for those born in American Samoa, and similarly would have had the arguments to overrule the insular cases and their racist underpinnings that still permeate our society. The task force on the ethics of local public sector lawyering, which is comprised of some of the leading public sector, municipal, and ethics attorneys in the state, has been tasked to prepare a comprehensive report focusing on the ethical considerations surrounding representation of governmental organizations and local municipalities, including conflicts of interest. The task force on the modernization of criminal practice, in partnership with other stakeholders, including the Commission to Reimagine the Future of New York Courts Pandemic Practices Working Group, is actively working to review these changes and develop practicable solutions for criminal law practitioners, our clients, and the courts alike. Their recommendations will focus on sentencing reform, uniformity and predictability with e-filing, e-discovery, and the service of legal documents, and improvements to the delivery of justice within our state's thousands of town and village courts, the justice courts. Looking toward the future, I would be remiss not to mention the task force on emerging digital finance and currency. NFTs, cryptocurrency, digital assets, stablecoin, the metaverse, Web3. The effects of these new evolving technologies on business, law, and society are playing out in real time around the world. The task force, in partnership with New York University, recently produced a major conference on preparing your practice and clients for the newest digital revolution, the video of which is available in the New York State Bar Association webpage, and I encourage you all to take the time to watch it. The task force has also scheduled an exciting CLE program that is taking place tomorrow morning here at the Hilton. I encourage you to attend. Over the next few months, the task force will continue to develop cutting-edge programming for our members and make recommendations on legal and regulatory issues surrounding digital finance and currency, and to promote the appropriate use of digital assets and Web3 resources by the New York State Bar Association to keep pace with the industry and the expand global community. In 2023 will be a year of great opportunity for the New York State Bar Association. In Washington, the New York State Bar Association leaders will continue to engage with Congress and the Biden administration to implement our federal legislative priorities, including student loan debt relief, funding for the Legal Services Corporation, the sealing of criminal records in the federal system, measures to safeguard voting rights and voter participation, and the passage of the Equality Act. Concerning equal rights, I am proud that the participation of our association's participation as amicus curiae in 303 Creative LLC versus Yanas, a pending case before the Supreme Court on the intersection of LGBTQ rights in public accommodations and the free speech clause of the First Amendment. No matter the decision of the court, the New York State Bar Association is committed to equal rights for all and will ceaselessly advocate for its members and the constitutional rights of all Americans. At the state level, we look forward to working with our new chief judge on matters of interest to the bench, the bar, and the court users of the New York State. In Albany, the association's advocacy efforts will continue on several major legislative goals, including support for equal rights amendments, the Clean Slate Act, the right to counsel in housing proceedings, and immigration matters. We will continue work on the repeal of the century-old Judiciary Law Section 470. As the past few years have demonstrated, a physical office is not needed, and the time has long passed for New York admitted attorneys to practice law having to maintain offices in New York State. And as I reported to the House in November of last year, our 18B assigned counsel litigation against the state of New York is underway. The time has long passed for an immediate statewide, state-funded increase in assigned counsel rates. We are optimistic as to the merits and our ultimate success on the foremost priority for our association. I would like to take this opportunity to give an update on One Elk, our bar center in Albany. I am happy to report that a professional engineer and architect have been retained to assess the structural needs of the facility and expedite the work and planning necessary to revitalize the bar center as our home for generations of members to come. To encourage our sections to make use of the bar center for meetings and programs with an emphasis on cost savings associated with the use of our in-house technology, staffing, and our centralized location. As I mentioned, the theme of my presidency has been and continues to be investing in the future of the profession. The New York State Bar Association, through the work of its sections, which are the lifeblood of our association, the efforts of our task forces and committees, and most importantly, the dedication of our members, is better positioned than ever to advocate to support the practices of New York lawyers, no matter where they might reside. I will never forget the inspiration that I felt at the annual meeting 18 years ago when the president of the New York State Bar Association, my good friend and mentor, Kenneth G. Standard, chatted with me on an escalator at the Marriott Marquis As a young lawyer and a junior member of the association, this interaction was akin to meeting a celebrity and encouraged me to aspire for leadership, both within the association and the profession at large. I encourage all of our new and young lawyers to follow in that path. It is rewarding. Colleagues, the member referral program will close on March 31st of this year. If you have not already convinced, I hope that the activities you have participated in over the last few days here at the annual meeting, it seems like decades, the cutting-edge CLE programs, the inspirational award ceremonies, the collegial dinners, luncheons, and networking events have persuaded you that not only your bar association membership is essential for a productive, successful, and happy career, but encouragement of others is necessary to keep us vibrant. Do your part for our association and our profession, and encourage your colleagues, your peers, and most importantly, as I've already mentioned, our young and new attorneys to join the New York State Bar Association. It is a worthwhile investment. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you at the continuation of our events this week. I now move to item number 5 on the agenda, the report of our treasurer, Dominic Napolitano.
I haven't even been given the report yet. Good morning, everyone. Always good to see people in person, and I'm very happy that you were able to make it here this morning. I will be reporting on the results of the operations of the New York State Bar for the period ending December 31st, 2022. I believe Jessica is taking care of the slides this morning, and she is. Thank you, Jess. As you can see from our first slide on the screen, our revenue, expenses, and surplus through December of last year shows that our revenue is down by approximately $293,000. Although membership dues and CLE revenue have also decreased, section program revenues have increased by approximately $548,000. I promised our finance chair, my dear friend Michael McNamara, that I would not use the word dire, as I believe I used in my last report. So I'm going to use the word concerning, somewhat concerning. I'll qualify it. Our expenses have increased substantially over our operating surplus. Although our operating surplus is positive, it is well below that which we had last year. Much of this increase is due to an increase of about $1.5 million in section expenses. As you are aware, many sections returned to in-person destination meetings in 2022, which are much more expensive than virtual meetings. Salaries and fringe have also increased due to increased in cost benefits. Also, we have an actuary to be determined at our annual expenses for post-retirement medical plan, but we will not have that accounting until the end of next month. Just slide 2, please. This slide shows our basic membership dues revenue comparing 2022 to 2021. Dues revenue through December 31st, 2022 is $9,058,000, which is about $277,000 less than it was last year. As membership will be addressed in other presentations this morning, I will not speak more about that. I'll leave that to our other presenters. Slide 3, please, Jess. This slide shows our continuing legal education portion of our association. CLE revenue in 2022 decreased by about $500,000. As was discussed in November, there were many challenges in 2022. The plan for 2023, with the leadership of Kathy Sikorsky and her staff is to increase program and profitability, and I have no doubt, as you know, Kathy's track record on this has been exceptional throughout the years, so I have no doubt that Kathy and her people will do a great job coming this year. Slide 4, just please. This section shows our revenue and expenses, and I'll speak on the section revenue briefly again because there will be others that will speak to this. Section dues have decreased by about $64,000, and program and other revenues have increased by about $548,000 as of December of last year. However, section expenses have also increased, as I mentioned earlier, by $1.5 million during the same period. The revenue from sections in 2022 is $219,000 compared to $1.2 million in 2021. Again, not to use the word dire, but to use the word concerning, as I promised Michael I would. Turning to slide 5, please, Jess. This, as you can see, is a pie chart of our budget comparing 2022 to 2021. As I noted in the beginning, although our expenses are up by $3 million in December of 2021 compared to 2022, this chart graphically shows the increase in section expenses, as I had just mentioned. The section pie chart of the section part of the chart is the dark blue. The other expenses, as you can see, have been pretty much consistent with what they were in 2021. This slide details, I'm sorry, the next slide, please, Jess. Yeah, to the real concerning news, but of which we have no control over. This slide details the investment gains and losses comparing 2021 and 2022. As you are all aware, the market declined substantially in 2022. Our investments lost over $8.7 million this year, as compared to the gain of more than $3.4 million in 2021. That's a swing of $12.1 million. This is somewhat concerning, especially considering that it's hard to know when the economy might turn around. It's a guessing game. We all know this. It's something to keep in mind, however, when we consider how we spend our association funds. I thank you very much for listening to this report, my penultimate report in my 4 years as your treasurer. I promise to keep you informed as things develop. I look forward to my next and last presentation when we next meet. I promise you that as I started this journey 4 years ago, I had on the screen a little comic relief. I may bring it back, but we'll see when that happens. So thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Dominic. Your report is received with thanks. We now move to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the report of the recommendations of the Committee on Bylaws. The report will be presented by Eileen Buchholz.
Yes, I am not Bob. So I'm here to move the amendments that are in your materials. The first one is the removal of the sunset provision for the diversity seats in the House of Delegates and the 2 diversity seats on the State Bar Association's Executive Committee. Any questions? I'm happy to field them in September's meeting, or June's meeting rather. Maybe it was September. Anyway, at the June meeting, in Cooperstown, we agreed to remove the sunset provision and to make the seats permanent, and that's what we've done. We've also clarified the definition of NALP's definition of diversity, the racial and ethnic minority. So that's now clear, which it was not before. Secondly, we have added a provision in Article 2 affirming and recommitting to the State Bar's policy on ethnic and minority and all kinds of diversity equity, and inclusion. So we've included that. That's our second amendment. And the third one is to clean up a cross-reference in one of the sections to another section that got bumped by something that got added. This happens in statutory construction all the time. So I would move these amendments.
Thank you. In compliance with Article 17 of the bylaws, a majority of the full membership of the House subscribed to the proposed amendments at the November 2022 House meeting. In further compliance with Article 17, notice of the proposed changes was published in the New York State Bar Association's weekly email to the entire membership. You can indicate that the proposed amendments will achieve 3 results. First, as outlined in Part 1 of the report, to implement the resolution of the Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion as adopted by the House of Delegates on June 18, 2022, directing the addition of a new Section 2 to Article 2, and amendments to Article 5, Sections 3H, and Article 7, Section 1F1. Second, as outlined in Part 2 of the report, to incorporate requests made by the Committee on Membership for amendments to Article 3, Section 1D1, and Article 3, Section 6. Third, as outlined in Part 3 of the report, the correct and internal citation error at Article 4, Section 7. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, there is a motion and a second. Do we have a vote? All the ayes?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. Item 8 on the agenda is a memorial for past President John J. Yanas, Sr. John J. Yanas, Sr., President of the Association from 1989 to 1990, passed away in Albany on January 8th. A memorial in his honor will now be offered by past President Justin L. Vigdor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm moved and honored to have been asked to say a few words in tribute to the Honorable John Yanas, Sr., who passed away earlier this month. Although regrettably, I've had too little contact with him in the last several years, I've known John for almost 50 years as we devoted our time and such talents as we had to this Bar Association and its foundation. As we mourn his death in sadness, we must also celebrate his long life and the lessons that we learned from it. Devoted to the profession, we served together over many years on many association committees, and we both had the honor to serve as the association president. John was devoted to this profession. We served together for many, as I've said, many, many years. He was a highly esteemed trust and estates lawyer and real estate lawyer. And he was also very active in the American Bar Association and in the College of Real Estate Lawyers. John's life is an example of how life ought to be lived, with modesty, dignity, and civility to others. and as a role model husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. And he's here spiritually to inspire us all. His leadership in the bar was matched by his leadership in the Albany community, where he served as city court judge and chair of the mayor's selection committee. Also a member of the boards of the Home and City Savings Bank, Monroe Abstract and Title Corporation, and the Fort Orange Club. As a person of very deep faith, he gave much of himself to the Christian Brothers of New York, from which he received letters of benefaction and a Distinguished Trustees Award. Nor did he neglect his alma mater, Albany Law School, on whose board he served, and which awarded him an honorary doctoral degree. For all of this, John was recognized with a listing in Who's Who in American Law. And with all of this, he still made time for his love of jazz, the American musical theater, and the great game of golf. In short, John clearly met Mark Twain's test of a good man, one who so lives that when he dies, even the undertaker is sorry. Our profession, indeed our society, is poorer for his loss.
I now ask that we observe a moment of silence in John's memory. Thank you. That concludes the business of the annual meeting. I ask for a motion to adjourn the annual meeting of the New York State Bar Association 2023. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. We will now continue with the annual meeting of the New York Bar Foundation.
Good morning, everybody. So, as you know, the members of the Bar Association are the members of the Bar Foundation, and for that reason, I now call to order the annual meeting of the New York Bar Foundation. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the January 22nd, 2023 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve? Is there a second? Second. Motion. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next item of business is a report on our activities during the 2022 year. So this year we celebrate partnerships. Partnerships with you as members of the Bar Association, members of the House, members across New York State, our fellows, and the grantee members of our legal community. Together we play a unique role to help improve the lives of people throughout New York State. We shine a spotlight on the giving side of our profession and on the people who work to bring access to justice to all. We provide critical support to the most vulnerable people in our communities. On your tables, you'll see the 2022 annual report of the Foundation sets forth in detail our activities. I urge you to take a look at it. I want to highlight a few, I'll be short, a few items. We began 2022 by honoring John Feerick, Dean Emeritus and Professor of Fordham Law School with the Foundation's Lifetime Achievement Award at our virtual annual Assembly of the Fellows. And with your support this year, the Foundation presented nearly $800,000 in grants, fellowships, and scholarships. The scholarships to help law students, giving voices to people in the community, and supporting programs of the New York State Bar Association. We allocated more than $601,000 in grants to 97 programs. The grants served over 1.2 million people. The grants served over 1.2 million people, but impacted more than 2.7 million when you count families that were affected. Our grantees have all consistently talked about the impact that we've had. One grantee talked about the impact of the grant of the foundation that helped them support young people and that provided support to 450 young people with direct legal representation and assistance. This year, we partnered with the Young Lawyers Section for the 7th year to raise funds in support of the Foundation's grant program with special focus on veterans legal services. Our online campaign raised more than $23,000 and is allocated to support programs assisting veterans. We welcomed 38 new fellows to the Foundation from across New York State. Fellows are invaluable partners to the success of the Foundation, exemplifying and demonstrating that the practice of law is a helping profession. Fellows are distinguished members of the bench and bar who are recognized for the outstanding professional achievement and dedication to the legal profession. If you're invited to become a fellow this year, I would urge you to please accept. It is a distinguished honor. Any fellows in the room today that would stand so we could thank you? No one's standing. All right. I know you're there. Yay! That concludes this part of the agenda, my report. May I have a motion to ratify and confirm the actions of the Board of Directors since the 2022 annual meeting? So moved. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Thank you. The motion carries. Together, we help improve economic fairness and social equity, achieving greater inclusion and fairness. There is still much work to be done as the needs of our most vulnerable neighbors continue to grow. Now, before we move to the next order of business, I do want to let you know and take this opportunity to congratulate Susan Lindenauer, who is this year's Foundation's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, and Michael Getnick, who is this year's Foundation's President Award recipient. Both have made an indelible impact on our community and will be honored at the virtual assembly of the Fellows on January 27th. I hope you'll be able to join us. If you haven't signed up for it, please stop by our table and talk to Deb Ospelmeyer or Lee Dorr about signing up. I would very much like to thank the Bar Association and President Sherry Wallach for inviting the Foundation to participate in this annual meeting week and tonight's gala. With the inclusion of our online silent auction and tonight's very cool, live auction. I want to thank the Honorable Cheryl Chambers and all the members of the fundraising committee who have obtained items and those who donated items for their incredible hard work. We have many amazing items, and there are a few bidding wars out there. Please stop by the Foundation table or take a look at the postcard at your desk, and you can scan the QR code and bid away. Our next item is the nomination of Foundation Board of Directors. The chair of the Nominating Committee, David Shraver, was unable to attend this morning, so I will give the report. The Nominating Committee recommends for election the following individuals who are members of the New York State Bar Association to serve as incumbent directors to the Foundation Board of Directors and begin their next 3-year term. The directors to begin their second term to commence June 1st, 2023 and conclude May 31st, 2026. June Castellano from Rochester, James Kobach, New York City, Alice Mirsky Nanwat. And directors to begin their third term to commence June 1st, 2023 and conclude May 31st, 2026, William Russell, New York City, and Myrna Santiago Pauling. I would like to move the slate as presented. May I have a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all. Are there any other items to be brought before this meeting? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And seconded? All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Are we this is like historical. We're ahead of time. Historical. Have a good day, everybody. See you all tonight.
So, we will now go directly into our House of Delegates meeting, and I call that to order. I want to start out by giving you the basic procedures we're going to follow. Firstly, I want to remind everyone to complete the attendance cards that you all have. It's very important that we have those. We like to have them for a lot of reasons. One is to see who's participating and see who's not participating so that we can have an active House. Secondly, with regard to today's meeting, if you have a comment to make, please approach the microphones. We will not take comments from the floor. You would have to get in line. There's 2 microphones. 2? Tom? Those 2? Yeah. There's 2 microphones from which you can speak. Secondly, speakers can only speak once on a subject, and you are limited to 3 minutes. We have an incredibly tight meeting today, and we have a stop time of 12:30. At 12:30, we're out of here. We have no choice. I feel like I did this a couple meetings ago in Cooperstown. If you have questions, you will address those questions to me as the chair of the House, and I will certainly ask the person to whom the question has to be answered by. And lastly, I'd like to ask you to refrain from any procedural motions until substantive discussion is completed. And in this regard, a delegate may rise to speak to the motion on the floor and advise me that he or she intends to make a procedural motion at the appropriate time, and I will recognize you at that time. So that's the polite part of what I've got to say. I want to say this as well. I'm getting coached. Can you hear me? I want to say this as well. If you are going to comment on a speaker or a report, please talk about the substantive parts of the report. I'm going to tell you in advance that every one of these reports is going to be very good. Every one of these reports has entailed a lot of work, and the people who prepared these reports have been very dedicated to what we are going to talk about today. But we don't have time to slap backs. So be substantive, and if you want to commend these report givers, and you should, please do so after the meeting. I want to say one more thing before we start moving on. As always, if you look around, there are numerous past presidents here. These are people who have been working for this association for years and years and devoted hours and hours. And I'm always incredibly impressed that they still come back, they're still knowledgeable about our business, and they are still always active and helpful in working for the best interests of this bar association. Today we're missing 3 people who I really think we all miss. Seymour James and his wife Cheryl Chambers are both suffering with the aftermaths of COVID, and they were pretty ill. And so Seymour is not here today. Vince Bizard took a bad fall, and I know that he would like to be here today, and I'm sure both he and Seymour are listening or watching by the streaming option. And thirdly, Mike Getnick, who is dealing with health problems, and our prayers go out for Mike and for all of our ill members. So our first item of business will be to address the minutes of the November 5th, 2022 meeting. Have you all had an opportunity to review them, and is there a motion to approve? Second. All in favor? Aye. Done. Doesn't sound like is there anybody opposed, really? Our first report is going to be by the Nominating Committee, and we'll call Sharon back up to give that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the Nominating Committee, I would like to submit nominations for officers and members at large of the Executive Committee. These nominations were made in compliance with association procedures. Beginning in June, we issued requests for candidate applications to all New York State Bar Association members. During the fall, we evaluated candidates' applications. In September and November, we interviewed the candidates at meetings. In November, we voted on the candidates and prepared our committee's report. Thank you to the members and alternates to the Nominating Committee for all of your efforts, and to the candidates for their participation in the process. I would now like to submit the following nominations for officers and members at large of the Executive Committee. For President-elect, Dominic Napolitano of Brooklyn. For Secretary, Taya R. Graves of New York City. For Treasurer, Susan Harper of New Jersey. District Vice Presidents, for the 1st District, Bridget Ahn of New York City and Michael McNamara of New York City. In the 2nd District, Pauline Young-Ha of Brooklyn. In the 3rd District, Jane Bello Burke of Albany. In the 4th District, Nancy Scocchetti of Saratoga Springs. In the 5th District, the Honorable James P. Murphy of Syracuse. In the 6th District, Michael R. May of Ithaca. In the 7th District, Mark J. Moretti of Rochester. In the 8th District, Kathleen M. Sweet of Buffalo. In the 9th District, Karen Beltran of Yonkers. In the 10th District, Michael A. Markowitz of Hewlett. In the 11th District, David Lewis Cohn of Kew Gardens. In the 12th District, Michael Marinaccio of White Plains. In the 13th District, Orrin J. Cohn of Staten Island. For Executive Committee members at large, Thomas J. Maroney of New York City, Christopher R. Riano of New York City, Lamar J. Jackson of Rochester, Lauren E. Sharkey of Schenectady, and Barry D. Skidelsky of New York City. This concludes my report on behalf of the Nominating Committee.
Is there a motion to close the nominations?
I move to close the nominations.
Second. Thank you. Is there a motion to, oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
I now move, Mr. Chair, that a single unanimous ballot be cast by the Secretary for the election of officers and for the Executive Committee members at large.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you.
By the way, Sharon is one of those past presidents who's still at it. Our next report is going to be the report and recommendations of the LGBTQ Law Section. It is a resolution to support the New York State Unified Court System's UCS bench card and best practices for judges using LGBTQ plus inclusive language and pronouns as adopted by the Office of Court Administration. The report will be presented by Section Member Sam Buckbauer, and we're hoping you can keep it at about 10 minutes.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Buckbauer, and I'm currently the membership chair of NYSBA's LGBTQ Law Section. I am excited to share with you our section's report and resolution of the New York State Unified Court System's bench card and best practices for judges entitled Using LGBTQ plus inclusive language and pronouns. I will be referring to this as the bench card throughout the presentation. A bit more about me. In addition to the LGBTQ Law Section, I am the co-chair of NYSBA's Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and as an associate attorney at the law offices of David A. Carraway, we know the importance in our trust in the state's practice on being knowledgeable on inclusive language when representing LGBTQ clients. The purpose of the bench card is primarily informational, offering guidance to judges to use LGBTQ plus inclusive language in accordance with judicial rules of conduct. Our section strongly urges the adoption of the bench card to make New York State's courthouses more welcoming and safe spaces for members of the LGBTQ plus community. Our section hopes the bench card will serve as an example of judicial practice that can be adopted nationwide when introduced to the American Bar Association. And here we turn to the applicable New York rule of the Chief Administrative Judge. Judges have a duty to foster an environment free of bias, prejudice, and harassment. Judges act in accordance with this rule by respecting an individual's requested pronouns. Failure to refer to someone using their preferred pronouns manifests bias and prejudice as to the individual's gender identity and gender expression. And here's how the bench card came to be. It was first developed by the 9th Judicial District's Access to Justice Initiative, which is chaired by the Honorable James L. Heyer. It was then submitted to and adopted by the Office of Court Administration. And here's the bench card in all of its glory as adopted by OCA. It is a 2-page reference guide divided into easy-to-read sections. And rather than have you strain your eyesight looking at this slide, I will highlight each of these sections of the bench card. The top of the page of the bench card cites the judge's obligation to foster a judicial environment free of bias, prejudice, and harassment. It also cites the opinion of the New York Advisory Committee on Judicial Ethics. As an ethical matter, permitting a judge to force someone to pick an ill-fitting gender pronoun would make people feel unwelcome, distract from the adjudicative process, and undermine public confidence in the judiciary's impartiality. One of the features of the bench card is that it provides succinct, easily digestible descriptions and definitions intended for quick reference for busy judicial officials. This section provides a brief overview of what the term LGBTQ+ means. And here we see a concise guide to gender variant and neutral pronouns. There we go. And this section provides a broader description of the term transgender and pronoun use. In addition to this paragraph, this section also provides information on what transition means and the legal, social, and medical components of transition. When we turn to page 2 of the bench card, we see more explanation provided for important terms to know. For example, it is important to understand that gender expression is one's outward manifestation of one's gender, while gender identity is an individual's internal perception of their own gender. Inclusive language in the courtroom conveys the message that all people, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, will be treated with dignity and respect. For example, when judges and attorneys share, volunteer their own pronouns, or ask what someone's preferred pronouns are, it reduces the perception that pronouns are only relevant for gender diverse persons. A judge should consider asking the questions on the slide if they become aware that a party is or may be gender diverse or transgender. And the bench card offers other suggestions on how to make courtrooms more inclusive places, such as avoiding terms that are gender specific. Additionally, the bench card highlights what terms have fallen out of favor and offensive terms to be avoided. The LGBTQ Law Section resolution, in being committed to promoting equality in the law for LGBTQ plus people, and that judges have a duty to foster an environment free of bias, prejudice, and harassment, and that our profession must be vigilant in protecting the LGBTQ plus community, especially transgender individuals. Oh, there we go. We ask NYSBA to support the use of LGBTQ plus inclusive language and pronouns, support the adoption of using LGBTQ plus inclusive language and pronouns bench card, and approve the report and recommendations of the LGBTQ Law Section. Here are some resources, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. So may I have a motion to approve the report?
So moved.
And is there a second? I want to just point out that at yesterday's executive committee meeting, this report was unanimously approved. Do we have any discussion? And I see that the first one to make it to a microphone is our president, Levin Wallach.
Thank you, Chairman of the House. And thank you, Sam, for this incredible report. This is historical. I rise to speak in support of this report and in support of the motion before the House. In my practice as a criminal defense attorney, I see firsthand the impact and the danger that people can be placed in when they are not identified as they choose to be. It can, in certain circumstances, put them in such danger that they are in danger of their life. This work is incredible, and the fact that the section has put forth and asked us to adopt this resolution, I fully support. And it is our intention, and I hope, to be able to bring this to the American Bar Association as a nationwide support. Thank you.
Thank you. Past President Mark Alcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the thrust of the report and recommendation is to respect the pronoun choices and the appellations of individuals, and where a party or attorney has advised the court that they wish to be addressed by in a gender-neutral term, the court should respect that request. But is it also your proposal that an individual who has not made such a request, or indeed an individual who has requested the opposite, may not be addressed as a man or a woman? Is that part of your proposal?
So I assume that's been addressed to me, and I
Yes,
choose
I'm
to answer.
sorry.
That's okay, Mark.
Thank you, Dick.
If you want to answer that, you can. Please.
Yeah, so the bench card is developed in compliance with the judicial rules that are applicable in New York. And so if the person doesn't identify as a man or a woman, as a non-binary individual, then that's how they would choose to be identified in the court.
I didn't understand the answer. If I want to be addressed as a man, is it appropriate for the judge to address me as a man?
Yes, that would be
Okay,
your
because, for example, Justin gave a very moving tribute today. He began by saying, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." Those were his first words. If he were to say that in court, would he be sanctioned or admonished? Is that inappropriate under your proposal, under this proposal? I asked Dick, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Can you answer that, though?
Sure. So it's a recommendation to use gender-inclusive language in the court, but I think it would be up to the judge to create an environment that is inclusive.
Well, all right. Look, the proposal says avoid terms and phrases that are gender specific, such as ladies and gentlemen of the jury, sir and ma'am. Now, you put a lot of things up on the board. You didn't put that up on the board. I would like to move to an amendment, if I may, if it's appropriate to do so. And
Mark, are you offering this firstly as a friendly amendment?
if I'm happy to have it so designated.
Okay.
I don't know if it would be
It's up to you
regarded.
whether
but
you want to accept it.
let me state what it is first.
Yes.
Before we ask whether it's friendly or not. I would like to add the following language. A group or an individual who has not requested otherwise may be addressed with a gender-specific pronoun or term. I'd like to add that language. That's my amendment.
Is that acceptable to you as a friendly amendment?
Well, I think that's out of order.
First of all, you have to approach the microphone.
Yeah.
Michael Sandberg, New York City Bar Delegation. I'm unclear as to where we're adding this to the bench card, to someplace in the resolution. The bench card is not ours. The resolution is ours. So if there's some place in the resolution that Mr. Alcott is suggesting be amended, that would be much easier to understand. OCA has adopted the bench card. And,
I understand, Judge. So, Mark, can you give clarification on that?
I'm obviously all we can do is craft our own resolution, and I would like that language to be added to our resolution.
So, Sam, you've heard the resolution. It's your call as to whether you want to accept it as a friendly.
Yeah, at this time, I don't accept the friendly amendment.
So, judges, if we adopt this, or perhaps even if we don't, but judges should be on notice that if they address me as sir, they're transgressing?
That would be incorrect, as that's your preferred pronoun.
Okay, well, I shouldn't engage in a dialogue. I've made my motion.
I understand.
I'd like to add that as an amendment to our resolution.
So there is a motion to amend on the floor. Is there a second? Second. Okay. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
With respect to that portion that addresses how a practicing lawyer should address jury, there is a statewide jury questionnaire that has been amended where the prospective juror is asked to identify how he or she wishes to be addressed. So that portion of this amendment, which seeks to expand on the issue of jury selection and addressing the jury, I think needs to be removed because that is not an issue with respect to the way jury selection in New York State is presented. Lawyers are on notice when they make the selection how the juror that is chosen wishes to be addressed. I thank you for the moment to address this issue.
Thank you. Sherry.
Yes, Sherry Levin Wallach, President of the Association. I rise to speak on the motion on the floor and to further explain the language that is used in the bench card. The language that is used in the bench card allows anybody to request the pronoun that they wish to be identified as. It is not exclusive, it is inclusive. And therefore, it doesn't prevent a judge from identifying an individual or referencing somebody with the pronouns he, him, she, or her. It just further allows for individuals to be asked to be identified with their chosen pronoun, whatever that may be.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you're speaking to the amendment.
Well, then we're in agreement. I want to make it clear. I don't think it is clear, but if we have no disagreement, there should be no problem with adding this language that a person, and really what I'm saying is a person should be addressed with the pronouns that the person chooses, and that in the absence of a choice for a gender-neutral pronoun, gender-specific pronouns are appropriate, because the bench card says something to the contrary. I could read it again, but it's there for you all to see.
Yes.
The bench card says the use of the term sir is not appropriate. And I would say maybe it's not appropriate when an individual has said, do not address me as sir. That's one thing. But if the person has not made such a request, that's the thrust of my amendment.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Jacob Pettershak, Legal Law Section. Point of order. Is there a way we could get the amended resolution on the screen? At this point, the argumentation is very nuanced. I'm having trouble following exactly how this amendment modifies the resolution on the floor and its impact. Thank you.
It's going to take a minute. It's going to take a minute. And while we wait, yes.
Yes, okay. Adrienne Koch from the New York County Lawyers Association. I think part of the problem here is that what I think we're trying to get at is that there shouldn't be an assumption. And I think what the amendment is suggesting is that in the absence of someone saying they want gender-neutral pronouns, everyone should assume they don't. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to get away from. There shouldn't be that assumption. Everyone should be asked, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Sam,
Yes.
Is that your feeling?
Yes, that would be correct, that there isn't the assumption. It's, to ask someone's preferred pronoun.
Thank you. Then in that case, the amendment is exactly the opposite of what the bench card and the resolution are intended to achieve.
Well, the bench card
Mark.
says avoid terms that are gender specific. It doesn't say when or how. It says avoid them. It's an across the board. So it's one thing to avoid them when that's the desire of the individual. It's another thing to avoid them across the board. It's a pretty simple point. We can vote it up or down.
So on the screen, with the amendment, a group or an amendment who has not requested otherwise, maybe.
No. Hey,
Individual.
it's a group.
Yeah, a group who has not requested
or an
otherwise may be
individual
addressed
who has
by
not
a
requested otherwise.
gender-specific pronoun.
Yeah.
That's the amendment.
A group or not an amendment.
I didn't hear it.
Amendments can't request. A group or an individual who has. A group, comma, or an individual who has not requested otherwise. That's
Okay.
my amendment.
Thank you. Okay, Judge.
Michael Sonberg, New York City Bar Association, and I also happen to be a member of the Richard Failer LGBTQ Commission of the New York State Courts, which is having a meeting as we speak. And one of the issues on the agenda is to adopt the bench card, or to commend the adoption of the bench card. The point of the instruction in the bench card about not using gender-specific pronouns is that once you start saying ladies and gentlemen, you discourage someone who doesn't identify as male or female from asserting the fact that that's not how they identify. You make it awkward for them. And the purpose of this is to make courtrooms comfortable for everyone who's there. If you say, folks, members of the jury, that's not offensive to anyone. But once you start with ladies and gentlemen, you then putting the onus on someone to say, excuse me, Your Honor, I don't identify as male or female. To expect that that's going to happen and that that's a good thing to happen and that's consistent with what the rules of judicial conduct require that judges do, I think is not the case. And therefore, I would urge that we not accept this amendment.
Thank you. I think we have one more commenter.
Eileen Buholtz from the Tickle section and chair of the section caucus. I speak in my individual capacity. I speak against the amendment. I think we should vote it down. I volunteer as part of the Monroe County Bar Association at School 29, and we had a brass quintet from the Eastman School of Music come and perform for the kids for our Christmas party for the kids. And I walked in and I said, I'm a graduate of the Eastman School of Music, and I walked in and I scanned the group and I said, hi guys, and I'm still kicking myself for doing that a month later because one of the bass trombone player is obviously transitioning, and I wish I had said hi folks and not hi guys. And it's not right to put the onus, as the previous speaker just said, on the people who are different to say, hey, I'm different, I want to be treated differently.
Thank you. There being no further indication of people who want to speak to this, there is a motion and a second. So we'll call for a vote. All in favor on the amendment? You're in favor of the amendment, correct? Any, all opposed? Nay. I think that the nays clearly have it. Thank you. So now we will return to the main motion. And are there any further comments with regard to it? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote on that. The motion has been made and seconded, and without rereading it, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you, Sam. So we have a bit of a treat today. The president of the American Bar Association is a New Yorker, as is appropriate. And Deborah Enix-Ross is here to address us, and we're so happy to have her here. And I think I see her coming. There's a light in my eyes. So I'd ask you to welcome Deborah Enix-Ross.
Good morning. Good morning. No, come on, you just had a lively debate. You can do better than that. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, that's much better. Let me just take a moment to take this in, because I am a New York City girl. I was born and raised in Harlem and went to public school in Harlem. I guess I'm the original uptown girl that maybe Billy Joel was talking about. At least in my head, that's what I think. But it really is an honor and a pleasure to be here on behalf of the American Bar Association. And thank you, President Wallach, Sherry, my friend, for your outstanding service. We've had an opportunity to work together and meet and have discussions over these last few months, and it's really been a joy to get to know you. And of course, it's great to be home in my New York legal community. We know that our bar associations would not thrive, let alone exist, without the dedications of thousands upon thousands of our volunteers in the New York State Bar Association and in the ABA, who see the law as a calling and chose to help lawyers be better lawyers and serve important matters of law and justice. I'm going to look up because I like it better when I'm looking directly at the camera and not that side angle where you get all your fat on your face. So I don't know about you, maybe that's just me and my vanity. But seriously, as the ABA, we know that we have dedicated volunteers, and a number of you in New York are also ABA members. But one of our most famous volunteers is retired Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, who accepted my appointment to serve as chair of our Rule of Law Initiative. And just a little fangirl moment there, this girl from Harlem got to be sworn in by a retired Supreme Court Justice Breyer. If that's not the American dream, I don't know what is. But Justice Breyer likes to joke that the ABA is the only organization with 200,000 lawyers and 300,000 committees, which is probably true. But he meant that really as a compliment, knowing that the ABA does so much and offers a home for every lawyer to make a difference. Justice Breyer was also speaking as a grateful volunteer, and I wish I could name all of the New York State Bar members who have served in the ABA as a volunteer in some capacity, but that would take too long. And even though I know we were ahead of time, if I did that, then that means we'd be behind time. But I would like to ask all of you who are ABA members, if you could please stand so that I could thank you on behalf of the ABA. And for the rest of you, I'll be seeing you afterwards to find out why you're not. But thank you all for your service. I do want to call out just a few people, including, as was mentioned, Seymour James, and I hope that he is on the road of recovery because Seymour serves on our Board of Governors. Steve Younger, I just saw, is the New York State delegate in our House. And of course, my dear friend and mentor, Jim Silkenat. Thank you, Jim. I literally would not be standing here if it were not for you. All of you exemplify that the ABA and state and local bar associations complement each other in our efforts to promote a strong legal profession. Our programs like the ABA Day in Washington, Grassroots Lobbying Event, Law Day, the National Celebration of Pro Bono, the Bar Leadership Institute, and others rely on the collaboration and cross-pollination that strengthens our bar associations and amplifies our collective national voice for our profession that the ABA provides. I'm both pleased and proud that President Wallach invited me here because I want to discuss with you a couple of particular issues of concern to me, and I'm finding that are also resonates and are concerns across the U.S. And that is the need for lawyers to model constructive, informed discourse at a time of increased political polarization. You can, yeah, thank you. At the ABA annual meeting in August, Justice Breyer reminded us that we have, quote, we have the rule of law when people accept an opinion that they may disagree with and might even think is wrong. Agree to disagree. That is what lawyers do every day in our practices. It's also what we do in the big tent that encompasses the diversity of membership in our bar associations, and it's what we must inspire our fellow citizens to do. We are at our best when we foster collaboration with one another, civility with one another, and a deep and shared understanding and respect for the role of civics in our national character. So civics, civility, and collaboration, those are the 3 C's that I believe lawyers and the Bar Association should promote at every opportunity. And that way, we can restore a 4th C, confidence in our democratic institutions. We know Americans are divided over many issues, and these divisions have roiled our politics. Faith in institutions is eroding, and there's a growing distrust of one another. Debates too often are not like the debate that we had here today, but too often they don't produce fruitful disagreements and discussions, but rather they produce heated exchanges and pointless clashes. The situation is only made worse by greater political polarization along partisan lines. We've seen attacks on the justice system, the norms of our democracy, and the rule of law. And just as troubling is the lack of confidence that Americans have in our courts. According to the ABA's 2022 Civics Survey, 52% of respondents agree with this statement, quote, "The justice system has racial bias built into its rules, procedures, and practices." Among young people aged 18 to 36, 63% said that there was racial bias. And Black people continue to see racial bias at a higher level than any other groups. While less than half of white people see racial bias, 54% of Hispanics do, and 75% of Black people responded that there is racial bias in the system. We are at a critical moment, and our differences are aggravated by incivility in public discourse and a general lack of understanding of civics. Civics education has long been an essential vehicle for students to learn about our democracy and the principles of civil discourse and responsibility. Civics education promotes grounding in critical thinking and fact-based debate, which are core elements of a successful democracy. It trains students to challenge misinformation and disinformation and gives future adult citizens the tools to engage effectively and constructively with opposing viewpoints. And lawyers are uniquely positioned to lead the way in promoting civics, civility, and collaboration, those cornerstones of our democracy, so that we can restore confidence in our democratic institutions, in the judicial system, and we can protect the rule of law. To help guide us, the ABA has established a commission on the cornerstones of democracy, whose members include our former New York State Bar President Sharon Stern Gertzman, who will be chairing our Law Day. Lawyers can model the behavior we wish to see, and the ABA has the tools and the resources to help us embrace this role. We have conversation guides to use in programs that will model civil discourse on contested issues. I would dare say you could use the clip from the debate that you just had as a model. We're featuring civics and civility programming at events throughout the 2022-2023 bar year, including, as I mentioned, Law Day. And civics and collaboration will be critical as the ABA and lawyers everywhere begin to understand the profound changes in law and society we're witnessing at a pace not seen in our lifetimes. Our careful consideration of all issues rooted in the law and our deliberative approach can turn down the heat and increase the light we need to bridge our differences. This will require all of us to model generosity in our thoughts, our behaviors, as we respect views beyond those that will give us immediate comfort and self-assurance. I ask you to please join us in the Cornerstones of Democracy initiative, whether you put on a program or promote these issues in your community. You can download our discussion guides and program materials and learn more, because there's always a website, so it's ambar.cornerstones@the-ABA. Collaborating together, we can emphasize that Americans can listen to each other, we can accommodate differing views, and we must appreciate these abilities for their essential role in maintaining our representative government and our freedoms. This time of unprecedented change demands the ABA's national leadership on other essential matters as well. Through our nonpartisan advocacy, we're on the lookout for legislation and policy proposals in Washington that would interfere with bedrock principles like the attorney-client privilege and tax policy that would harm law firms. Our nonpartisan evaluation of federal judicial nominees examines each for their professional competence, integrity, and judicial temperament. We promote the ability of an independent judiciary to conduct its work without fear. The ABA was a leading advocate for legislation recently signed into law to limit disclosure of federal judges' personal information. And we were pleased when Congress enacted legislation to protect Supreme Court justices and their families. We help our members in practical ways, too. Our Practice Forward is helping our members navigate a fundamental shift stemming from the pandemic and its aftermath to find fulfillment in their work, better serve clients, and advance their careers. Our recent report, based on a survey of lawyers throughout America, recommends best practices to attract and retain a diverse array of lawyers, including hybrid and remote work, reducing stress and burnout, enhancing feelings of belonging, and maximizing the use of technology. The report and all of those resources are, again, on the ABA website. The ABA complements the work of state and local bar associations by demonstrating the need for volunteer legal services and highlighting our profession's commitment to pro bono. This is especially meaningful to me because, as many of you know, I started my career with MFY Legal Services right here in New York, actually in downtown Chinatown. So it's gratifying for me to see a legal aid lawyer serve as president of the New York State Bar Association. One of the ABA's signature pro bono programs, which most states, including New York, have adopted, is the online free legal answers. We've reached a milestone. In the 7 years since free legal answers went online, low-income people have logged more than 250,000 civil legal questions, and nearly 11,000 volunteer lawyers have signed up to answer them. So thank you to those of you who have volunteered or who have supported free legal answers. And if you haven't signed up for this convenient yet really important, valuable pro bono service, please do so. Here's another website, freelegalanswers.org at the ABA, and I would ask you to encourage your colleagues to do so as well. And we're calling special attention to our commitment to serving legal aid as we celebrate the upcoming 50th anniversary of Legal Services Corporation. The ABA was there at the beginning, and half a century later, we're still the nation's leading advocate for federally funded legal services for the poor. None of our programs and activities to advance the knowledge and professional excellence of lawyers, none of our leadership for justice, None of our voice for the legal profession at home and throughout the world is possible without the lifeblood of ABA membership. The ABA needs the support and participation of all lawyers, especially lawyers who have dedicated themselves to state and local bar associations, so we can benefit from diverse perspectives and demonstrate that we are united in our national voice for the legal profession. So again, thank you for those who are members, and for those of you who are not, I'll be right outside that door and I'll help you sign up. But let me close by returning to that phrase that everyone in this room, I'm certain, has uttered at some point, the phrase, agree to disagree. And that was coined by John Wesley, who was the English founder of Methodism. And for me, as a lifelong Methodist, I like to point that out, especially to my friends that are Baptists. In a memorial sermon for his colleague George Whitefield in 1770, Wesley acknowledged but downplayed the two men's doctrinal differences, as he said, "There are many doctrines of a less essential nature, and these we may think and let think. We may agree to disagree. But meantime, let us hold fast the essentials." I say to us today, let us hold fast to the essentials. Lawyers everywhere joining forces and working together must always advance the essentials of our profession and the rule of law. Thank you for all you do, for your friendship, for your support, and for your participation in a robust, organized bar that serves the public, strengthens our profession, and advances our democracy. Thank you very much.
It's always wonderful in the ABA to see the leadership of the New York Bar, and one of the takeaways, I think, from Deborah's talk is when she points out the people that are here in this room who dedicate so much to our Bar Association, still finding time to give to the ABA. It shows the dedication to the law, the dedication to our profession. And it also shows that when you talk to somebody who says they just don't have time, tell them to talk to Steve or to Sharon or to Kate Madigan or to many of the other people who are so immersed. And then you'll see what busy really is. So it's our pleasure now to present the Ruth G. Schapiro Award. And this year's award, which will be presented by our president, is going to go to the Honorable Elizabeth A. Wolford, who serves in the Western District of New York. And while I have not had as much experience with the judge as many of the people from the Rochester-Buffalo area, I did have a case during the pandemic, which I'm sure she won't remember, that had to do with discovery of a Taiwanese corporation. And what I found was the openness of her chambers and the approachability of the judge. So I think we're very fortunate today to do this, to give this award to you, Judge.
Thank you, and welcome. It is my distinct pleasure to present the Ruth G. Schapiro Award to the Honorable Elizabeth Wolford, Chief Judge of the Western District of New York. The Ruth G. Schapiro Memorial Award recognizes exemplary achievement by a member of the association in addressing concerns of women. It was established in honor of the Committee on Women in the Law's first chair, Ruth G. Schapiro. And Judge Wolford epitomizes the very essence of this award. Judge Wolford was appointed by President Obama as the first female United States District Court judge in the Western District of New York. In 2021, she became the first woman to become Chief Judge of the Western District of New York. She is an exceptional lawyer who has long been at the forefront of expanding diversity and elevating the role of women in our profession. She is a transformative leader who has spent her career selflessly dedicating her time towards helping others. Judge Wolford has been instrumental in developing a new pro bono plan designed to diversify the legal profession. She has mentored numerous women attorneys and has promoted legal services and funding for programs benefiting women and their families through her work with the bar associations and as a board member of legal and services organizations. Judge Wolford considers it a priority to open doors for women in the law in the community at large as well. Judge Wolford was among the first to implement the rule in her chambers that strongly encourages litigants to permit more junior attorneys to examine witnesses at trial. Although the rule applies to all attorneys, its impact has been a positive one for women. Judge Wolford is a past president of the Greater Rochester Association for Women Attorneys and the Monroe County Bar Foundation, and served as a member of the board of directors for Just Cause. In addition, she is a past recipient of the association's Ruth Stimson and the Outstanding Young Lawyer Awards. It is my distinct honor as a woman president of this great association to be able to present the Ruth G. Schapiro Award to such an incredibly deserving recipient. Thank you. Congratulations, and thank you for your dedication to elevating the role of women in our profession.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We pause for a photo op.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President Wallach. And thank you to the New York State Bar Association for this very, very nice honor. I also want to thank the Women's Bar Association of the State of New York and the Greater Rochester Association for Women Attorneys who nominated me for this award. I did not know Ruth Schapiro, but based on everything that I have read since receiving notice about this award, I am truly humbled to be receiving this award named in her memory. Ruth Schapiro died in 1991, and the award was created in her honor the following year, which is the same year that I graduated from law school. We all know that women have made tremendous strides in the profession from the time Ruth Schapiro graduated from law school about 70 years ago and the time that I graduated from law school about 30 years ago. I can only imagine the different experiences that she experienced as opposed to my experiences. And the New York State Bar Association and Women in Law Section deserve a great deal of credit for promoting women and being instrumental in advocating for the advances that women have made in the profession. But there's no question that work is still to be done. While my experiences have been different, thanks in many respects to the paths that were forged for me by women like Ruth Schapiro, I suspect that she and I also have had some similar experiences. When you look at the prior recipients of this award, there are many firsts in the group. Ruth Schapiro herself was the first partner at Proskauer, first female partner at Proskauer. And the first recipient of this award, the Honorable Judith Kay, was the first woman to serve as Chief Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals. As anyone who is a first knows, it is a great honor, but it also involves its own challenges and difficulties. Those challenges and difficulties are easier to navigate when you have the support of bar associations like this one. So thank you to each of you for your work on behalf of this important organization. I know firsthand the time that's involved in being actively involved in a bar association, but it is critically important work that is vital to the integrity of the profession, including the advancement of women in the profession and diversity as a whole within the profession. My niece Madigan is here with me today. She made the trip with me from Rochester, and Madigan is in the process of applying to law school. I am certain that just as my experiences were undoubtedly easier than Ruth Shapiro's and others who have come before me, Madigan will have many more opportunities available to her as a woman in the profession. And it is my great hope that during Madigan's legal career, we will get to the point where it is no longer so remarkable that a woman is appointed to a particular position. I look forward to the day when there are no more firsts. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm very honored to receive this award.
So I was right, she didn't remember the case. But I do. Our next report is an issue that we're going to vote on, and it is the report and recommendation of the Committee on the New York State Constitution. Now, this item is entitled Gubernatorial Selection in New York, Constitutional and Statutory Recommendations Regarding Gubernatorial Succession and Inability. The report will be presented by Committee Chair Chris Bobst and Chair of the committee's subcommittee on this subject, Alan Rothstein. So,
good morning, delegates. My name is Christopher Bobst, and I'm honored to be the chair of the New York State Bar Association Committee on the State Constitution. This is our committee's report on gubernatorial succession in New York. And what occasioned this issue being studied is the fact that in New York, if a family court judge in Niagara County office is vacant less than 3 months before an election, the governor has to get approval from the Senate to fill that position. But yet, no approval from any legislative body or by the voters is required for the governor to fill a vacancy in the lieutenant governorship. And that's somewhat of an anomaly and something that we thought should be looked into and examined. So we appointed a subcommittee that was very ably chaired by Alan Rothstein, who's going to share the specifics of what the report recommends. And when he dug into the issue, he and the subcommittee dug into the issue, they also noticed some different anachronistic provisions about the governor's not the governor when she leaves the state, some things that were missing in terms of gubernatorial inability, what happens, statutes that were over 60 years old and haven't been amended that refer to offices that don't even exist anymore. So, needless to say, a lot of work needed to be done. And Alan and his subcommittee got to work. They interacted with the New York County Lawyers Association and ultimately produced a report that the committee reviewed, had some suggestions about. The report was re-reviewed and ultimately was approved. And I'm very proud of it, and I hope that the delegates will agree that it is worth approving and that it's a valuable effort into this area that's far too long in need of reform. And before I turn things over to Alan to talk about the specifics of the report, I would just note two things. One is the subcommittee realized early on that there is no perfect solution to some of these questions. There are always going to be possible alternatives and well, you know, what about this and that? And the subcommittee, to its credit, evaluated a lot of different alternatives, reviewed the literature, looked at experiences in other states, and ultimately came up with what they believed was the best way of dealing with this issue. And also, I want to note that Tom Richards has been immensely helpful. He's our committee liaison, and he's been very helpful in this process as well. And as I said, I think Alan and his subcommittee did an excellent job, and I'm going to turn things over to him to go through the detail of the proposal, and at the end, it's my hope that it will be approved by this House.
Excuse me one second. I get a call once every 3 weeks. This seems to have been it. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. So Chris introduced the topic. We got interested in the topic. Obviously, appointments of lieutenant governor for the first 200 and something years, no governor made an appointment as a lieutenant governor. A couple were filled by special elections in certain circumstances, but for the most part, when there were vacancies, and they were, in history, there were at least 12 that have occurred. The position was just left open. Currently, the Constitution provides that the President pro tem of the Senate, basically the Senate Majority Leader, serves as Lieutenant Governor while there's a vacancy. And it had been just open until the next general election for governor. But that changed in 2009. There was a constitutional crisis of a sort. There was a crisis where there was a dispute as to or I would say it was a stalemate between the Republicans and Democrats in the state Senate. Governor Patterson appointed Richard Ravitch. His appointment was under Section 43 of the Public Officers Law. He claimed he had the right to do that. The Court of Appeals agreed with him. And so when Governor Hochul had acceded to the governorship, she had two opportunities to appoint lieutenant governor. She did so both times. So we felt that the process should be one with more accountability. Right now, as Chris pointed out, the governor can appoint without any checks or accountability anywhere. And so what I'm going to do, though, first is take the report in the order that the recommendations are presented. So I'll come back to this. The first thing we looked at when we did our report was the provision in the Constitution which says that when the governor leaves the state, the lieutenant governor serves as governor. We think this is quite mischievous and unnecessary in these times with worldwide instant communication. The mischief could occur, and has occurred in other states over the years, most recently in Idaho, where the governor left to attend a conference, and the lieutenant governor rescinded his COVID orders. They were from the same party, but they were political rivals. Other situations have happened in other states. We don't need that here. And also, there's a dispute over what absence from the state means, whether it's actual physical absence or otherwise. And cases have gone both ways on that. We feel the language should just be removed from the Constitution, period. When it comes to replacing the lieutenant governor, we believe the position shouldn't be left vacant or shouldn't be left to the president pro tem. As we'll get into later, it raises separation of powers issues. And also, the lieutenant governor should be somebody who would reflect the governor's view of the office and the governor's policies to the extent possible. The people elected the governor and should be able to have those views pursued. So we thought the governor should be able to appoint the lieutenant governor. However, we believe that appointment should be subject to confirmation by the legislature. Our view, it should be subject to confirmation by the majority of each house of the legislature. Now, we recognize most confirmations are by the Senate alone, but the 25th Amendment to the Federal Constitution provides for both houses of Congress to approve an appointment of a vice president, and that's what happened with Nelson Rockefeller. In addition, most states that have considered this and have a mechanism are using mechanisms with both houses. And in New York, if there's a vacancy in the other statewide offices, Attorney General and Controller, both houses are involved in that, in filling that vacancy. It's done in a different way, but it's done by the legislature itself, majority of the houses sitting together, which we don't support. But it does involve both houses. So we think both houses should be involved. We recognize there are politics involved. Certainly this week, all of us are aware of politics involved. But the lieutenant governor position is a political position. And the person who's put in should be reflective. Both the governor has this, decides who should be put up for the nomination, but there should be a fuller review because that person could accede to the governorship, as has happened. We do have a timetable built in to allow things to drag on. Not to drag on, rather. The Senate, both houses have to act within 60 days of an appointment for the first appointment. And the governor has 60 days to make an appointment. If the legislature rejects the appointment, then for subsequent appointments, there's a 30-day time frame for both the governor and the legislature. That's because there's a gearing up period. We really think that it's necessary to give the governor time to vet as necessary. I mean, her first appointment of Brian Benjamin perhaps could have used further vetting. And we also want to give the legislature ample time to vet. These changes could happen very suddenly, and to convene a committee to do the work that's necessary. After that process has gone on, if there's a subsequent nomination, then 30 days is more appropriate. Everybody's sort of geared up the mechanisms in place. And so it should work that way. If the governor doesn't appoint within 60 days, the legislature gets to appoint as they fill the vacancies for the Attorney General and Controller. And if the legislature fails to act within 60 days, the governor's appointment stands. So there are checks in this process. Now, keep in mind, if it does drag on, there is the temporary president is still the lieutenant governor, and there would be an election at the next, if that position is still vacant, there would be an election at the next feasible general election. That's what the Constitution currently provides. So we move on to a couple of other points. We feel it's not clear the Constitution what acting as governor means. And there's a concern in other states, there's been litigation, not clear what acting as governor means. We suggest the Constitution say that whoever acts as governor has the same powers as if that person were elected governor. We also think there's a separation of powers issue with a president pro tem, or if that person doesn't serve, the speaker serving as a lieutenant governor, or governor, really. We're focused on the governorship. If that person becomes governor, that person should no longer serve in the legislature. If it's a temporary replacement, such as if there's an impeachment proceeding or there's an inability of the governor to serve and the president pro tem succeeds, we would say for 60 days that person would not have to give up their seat but could not exercise their powers. But after 60 days, they would have to give up their seat and their leadership position in the legislature. Now, it's possible that a legislative leader won't want to do that. So there should be an improvement in the current succession statute in New York, which was put in 1951 to deal with nuclear holocaust, and has a succession of department heads listed to succeed after the President Pro Tem and Speaker could not accede to the governorship. And that is also, some of those positions no longer exist. That has to be changed, and the position has to be expanded so that in all cases where you need a succession, this would be operative. And we would put the Attorney General and Controller as statewide elected officials at the top of that list, followed by department heads chosen by the legislature. Finally, the inability statute. There is no inability provision in New York. I won't go into detail on it, but we prefer the model that's in the 25th Amendment to the Federal Constitution, which basically says that a committee is formed, in our case would be the Lieutenant Governor, Controller, and the Attorney General and several department heads, which by a majority vote would find a governor unable to serve, and then 2/3 of each house of the legislature would have to agree with that for the governor to be unable to serve. And to raise a point, a number of the states that have succession mechanisms rely on their Court of Appeals to do that, and we thought that was a mistake for a couple of reasons. First, the Court of Appeals would, in essence, be making law because there's no definition of inability, and there shouldn't be, because we can't possibly cover all those circumstances. And so that really is more political determination that should be left to the political branches. The court shouldn't be the decider of that. Secondly, there may be other issues involving this process, which would have to come to the court in its judicial capacity, and there shouldn't be confusion as to what roles the court has. And so basically, that's our presentation. We expect this would be put to the legislature as separate proposals. We would, for instance, the absence from the state and the lieutenant governor appointment, both of them would be separate pieces, and hopefully we would get some legislative attention. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the report and adopt it as the policy of the New York State Bar Association? The executive committee yesterday unanimously endorsed the report for favorable action. So moved. The report's been moved and seconded. I know that there are a couple of people who want to speak, and the first one would be Adrian Koch, who is the president-elect of New York County Bar.
Thanks very much. Yes, I'm Adrian Koch, president-elect of the New York County Lawyers Association. Last April, in the wake of the indictment and resignation of former Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin, NYCLA issued a statement detailing some of the problems arising from the absence of a clear mechanism for filling the vacancy in the office of Lieutenant Governor, and called upon NYSBA to study, investigate, and make recommendations for how to address this issue. And we offered our support in any effort to do so. We were pleased to then learn that the issue was also on NYSBA's mind. And not surprisingly, it expanded to cover not just lieutenant gubernatorial succession, but a number of other related issues as well. I have had the privilege of serving as NYCLA's liaison to the subcommittee that drafted the fine report that's now submitted for your approval. The task was truly Talmudic in nature, with multiple decision points and numerous possible solutions, each of which had potential strengths and drawbacks. Every conceivable permutation was carefully vetted and considered, and I'm tempted to say that the process was painstaking, but that would do it a disservice because it was done not with pain, but with the deepest respect. The resulting recommendations are obviously not the only possible mechanism for dealing with the issues addressed in the report. As the report itself recognizes, there are a number of other ways to approach those issues. But the thoughtful process that produced this report carefully balanced those possibilities in a way designed to work most effectively for New York. I applaud the result. I thank NYSBA for responding positively to NYCLA's statement and for inviting NYCLA to participate in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Our second speaker will be the bearded past president, Michael Miller.
Thank you. Michael Miller, past president of the New York State Bar Association. I rise in strong support and congratulations to this committee. The work it's done is important, it's meaningful, and I urge the House to not only to endorse it as a policy of the association, but for the association to put this at the highest level of our legislative priorities. The mess with the appointment of former Lieutenant Governor Benjamin, I think, highlighted just how important it is for there to be some sort of vetting process. I think also, you know, a lot of folks have spent time over the years on executive succession. As many of you may know, former member of this House, Dean Emeritus of Fordham Law School, John Feerick, was the principal architect of the 25th Amendment, and indeed the report references Dean Feerick's work and the work of the Rule of Law Clinic at Fordham that issued a very comprehensive report back in June that this committee also referenced. But more importantly, this report calls for the full Senate or the full legislature to approve any appointment. I think the debacle that occurred in Albany on Wednesday during the hearings, so-called hearings of presiding Justice LaSalle highlight just how important it is that the full legislature address any vacancy of importance. So I thank the committee for its hard work, and I urge the association, upon adoption of the report, to put it at the highest level of its legislative priorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, past President Miller. Yes, please identify yourself, who you represent.
I'm Peter Kiernan from the New York City Bar Association. I have several points. Firstly, the report itself says that in 2009, Governor Patterson made the appointment of a lieutenant governor to break a tie in the Senate. And although there is a clarifying footnote, I want to point out that that was not the reason that Governor Patterson made an appointment for lieutenant governor, and everyone in the House should understand that the lieutenant governor cannot break a tie on matters of substantive legislation. It's not like the federal model. Second point I'd like to make is I think that the 60-day provision for both the governor to act and then for the legislature is unwise. I think that's far too long. I'd point out to you for several reasons. But in 2009, when we had a constitutional crisis and Governor Patterson appointed a lieutenant governor, there was not the luxury of waiting 60 days for him to act or 60 days for the legislature to act because we had a genuine crisis. In 2021, when Governor Hochul appointed the current lieutenant governor, Mr. Delgado, she had no luxury of time because the ballots had already been established. And they had to change the law so her running mate, so she could have a running mate, which she deemed very important. And we've seen in history of our state that it's important that the governor and lieutenant governor get elected. It's unfortunate when the lieutenant governor is separately elected and it's of a different persuasion than the governor. We've had some recent history about that. A second point I'd like to make about the 60 days is that it might be dangerous. Commenting on what's happened with Judge LaSalle points out that there's an enormous capacity for mischief in the legislature. And you're introducing a level of politics that may not be necessary. We could have a divided government, the House and the Assembly and the Senate under different party leadership. We've had that for 40 years recently. That's a recipe for a lot of contention and maybe no agreement. You know, the politics is a struggle for power, and we're inviting a power struggle that may not be healthy. But that's all the thing is with Governor LaSalle, is a power structure. I'd also point out, for the same reasons, I think this is dangerous, not just impractical. And I would say the same thing in respect of having both houses of the legislature act when perhaps we should only have the Senate and a shorter time period. You know,
Thank you. I need to ask you to wrap it up. We're coming to the end of your time.
Well, I have 2 more points I'd like to make. I'm willing to sit down if you don't want to hear them. So.
If you can do it very quickly. Thanks.
Well, a predicate of the report is it would be very undesirable to have an unelected governor, because in the instance of an appointed lieutenant governor, if the governor then had to resign or something like that, we'd have an unelected governor. Well, we had that nationally. When Spiro Agnew was forced to resign as vice president, Gerald Ford was appointed vice president. Then President Nixon had to resign, and Gerald Ford became the president. The only point I would make is the republic did not fall. I'll save my other point.
Thank you. Is there any other comment with regard to this motion? Great. Then this.
Do you want us to respond?
Yes. I'd be happy to have you respond to that.
Okay. Just very, very briefly, Peter, can you and I meet in the back of the room afterwards to look at some of the language in the report that you mentioned? Yeah. I'll meet you at the back of the room after this is all done. But the
for the benefit of those here, though, if you would respond.
Yeah. No. That's on a slightly different. The tie, as Peter points out, is not on a substantive issue. The tie can only be, it's called a casting vote on procedural issues, some of which could be very important, but they don't pertain to bill signing.
With regard to the timing and the issue of both houses, the subcommittee and the committee looked very closely at the timing requirements. We would note that the 25th Amendment does not have a time requirement, and they let Nelson Rockefeller sit for 4 months before he was confirmed. So by us actually putting a time limit in there, we're actually encouraging swifter action than the U.S. Constitution does. With regard to the time, because the fallback, if the legislature does not act within 60 days for the first nomination, then 30 days thereafter for any subsequent nomination, the nominee is automatically confirmed. So because that's the default if they don't act, we wanted to provide a fair amount of time for them to act. Certainly they don't have to take the full 60 days, and in the situation that Mr. Kiernan, who was kind enough to discuss these issues with us before today, if in the situation that he references with when Lieutenant Governor Benjamin resigned, that the legislature would have still acted with the same swiftness that it did. By this case, though, by giving them 60 days, that allows them to properly vet the nominee and go through the process. There were several members who had legislative experience. One of the benefits of the committee is that it does have members who have legislative experience, gubernatorial office experience, judicial experience, and it was believed that 60 days was an appropriate amount of time to allow the procedure to properly play out, not be too rushed, and allow a proper confirmation. With regard to the 2 houses, we drew on the inspiration of other states, and for a decision of this magnitude, it was believed that both houses should have a role. Historically, confirmations for many offices have been the sole province of the Senate, there are many arguments as to that not being the appropriate procedure, that why should you only have one body representing the people make a confirmation, especially excluding the one that's more closely aligned to the will of the people by having smaller districts. So in that scenario, looking at the experience of other states, it was believed that for an office of this magnitude, that full confirmation by both houses was appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say it is both houses, not committees in both houses. Let's make sure everybody knows.
Thank you for that clarification. So there being no further comments, I'd like to call for a vote. So all in favor of ratifying this report and adopting it as the policy of this association, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next report has to do with the Task Force on Mental Health and Trauma and Informed Representation. And this report is on our agenda for informational purposes only. The task force was formed by President Levin Wallach in June of last year, and the report will be presented by Joseph A. Glazer.
Good morning and thank you. I want to start with just a couple of brief thank yous. First and foremost, to our president, Sherry Levin Wallach. It is through her foresight and deep understanding of these issues that this task force was brought into being. I also need to do a quick shout out to my co-chair, Sheila Shea, who is Director of Mental Hygiene Legal Services in the Capital District. And also a heartfelt thank you to Kim McHarg from NISBA, who has been such a stalwart supporter of the work that we are doing. I also just saw my friend Lillian Moy come in. I want to give her a shout out. We've known each other for many years. I am very proud of the work that she has done, and probably jumping the gun on somebody who's about to speak after me, but I just want to congratulate her on her retirement after a wonderful career of serving many of the people that I am going to talk about today. The role of the task force. The purpose behind the task force is for us, as members of the bar, practicing attorneys in whatever capacity, to become more trauma-informed and trauma-responsive. Trauma-informed. You learn informed by absorbing it. I become informed by reading the New York Times. I become responsive by doing something about it. That is what this task force is about. It is about trauma-informed representation and being responsive to the needs of the people we all collectively serve. The task force was created to explore, study, and evaluate the intersection between our mental health crisis and our civil and criminal justice systems. Many of us are aware that there's a mental health crisis out there. But as the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Community Mental Health in Westchester County, and with 30 years in the field working with the populations we're talking about, something that needs to be added about the word crisis. Today, we are putting a great deal of effort into dealing with crisis. What that means for people living with behavioral health needs is they are in crisis because every other point in the system is failing. It comes to us, thanks to Sherry, as something this task force, bless you, is looking to address. But not just from the mental health perspective. We're not just looking at the issues of justice and fairness, but the additional burdens of discrimination based upon stigma, upon incarceration, homelessness, and a myriad of other disadvantages faced by people living with mental health, substance use, and co-occurring disorders. What is wrong with you? Our task force has created 4 subcommittees: civil justice, criminal justice, seamless systems, and trauma-informed representations. We bring in guest speakers. We're working together to develop a report, a broad report to the Bar Association. Because of the weight of this organization, we have yet to have a speaker we have invited say no to come and address our task force. In the next month, we will hear from the commissioners of mental health and the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, who will come and talk to us about our agendas. I just want to go back a second. I just shouted out, "What is wrong with you?" That strikes everybody. It's hurtful and makes you wonder, why did I just do that? Why did I say that about you? The answer is very simple. The negativity that comes with that phrase is how we often address people we don't think fit our idea of the norm. In the practice of law, that is troubling, because it's not what is wrong with you. What we now know about trauma and why we have this task force is because the real question is, what has happened to you? And part of what we're looking to do through the task force is help us, as an association and the practitioner members, change how we look at the people we serve and how we commit to serving them better. When I ask the question, what is wrong with you? We do that not just with our colleagues, not just with our clients. We do that in a large part of our life. So as we talk about this, it's really changing a frame of mind and how we as a task force can work collectively and come up with a report that will help us all better understand how to work with individuals with mental health, substance use, and co-occurring needs. I'm flattered that Sherry invited me to be the co-chair of this task force, because it's a culmination of 30 years of my practice, of my experience as an attorney, being brought to bear to serve all of us better. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, but there was a study out of California more than 25 years ago, studying thousands of patients in the Humana system, where they went back and researched and looked in their medical records about the negative experiences suffered by children and the long-term effects of those experiences on their lives as they became adults. Physical health, mental health, substance use. But it's not just the trauma as a child. Many adults suffer trauma as well. In fact, the question I asked, what is wrong with you, in certain circumstances, is a traumatic question in and of itself to ask. So what we're talking about is a cultural shift for all of us, so that we better serve people with behavioral health needs. If you take a look at the current issue of the Bar Journal, there are some great articles in there on a number of different things that I think helps fill in. Because I've got 10 minutes, I'm going to do what I can, but there's a lot more information out there. When we wrap up our report, we're hoping in the not too distant future that we will be sharing much more of that with you. But then there's the last question. Why should the New York State Bar Association do this? Why is this important? In my many years as an advocate, I've had different roles. I've been president and CEO of a major nonprofit. I've been a practicing attorney. I've been in and out of government. I'm now, as I said before, the Deputy Commissioner of Mental Health. Each of us, in our own way, is an advocate. Individual advocacy, I represent a person. Systems advocacy, I work for an entity which can and should be changed, or a combination of both. Many of those are led by people who are members of the bar as well. That is our collective responsibility. But the single greatest reason we should do this, simply put, is these are issues worthy of the weight of the New York State Bar Association to get behind. We want a seamless system. We want a better criminal justice system. We want capacity to be available so our clients aren't in crisis. And again, this isn't just clients on the civil side or the criminal side. People with serious mental health needs are involved in commercial litigation, are purchasing homes, are doing all of those things. we have a responsibility to meet our clients where they are and a responsibility to better understand where they're coming from. So in the next few months, we will be getting back to you with a full report. I thank you very much for your time, and it is my pleasure to be the co-chair of this task force. Thank you.
So the next item on our agenda is a report and recommendation from the Task Force on Racism, Social Equity, and the Law, which was formed by past President T. Andrew Brown in June of 2021. Many of us have already heard various ideations of this report, but the report will be given today by Lillian Moy and Taya Grays.
I just want to say, if I had fallen, I couldn't even have said it was an injury in the furtherance of my employment. But that's okay.
Happy retirement.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. So I'm sorry, was there another slide right before this? Okay. So we are back. We are here to provide you with our final report and recommendations. And Lily and I are going to do a bit of a walkthrough of the presentation and also explain why you should support it. Wanted to start with, oops, sorry. Okay. We recently celebrated Dr. King Day in the beginning of the week. And this quotation, I think, sets the context and sets the foundation for the work that Lillian and I and the various people on our task force, some of them who are here today, as well as on the committee, how all this work comes together. We may have all come on different ships, some of us voluntarily and some of us involuntarily. But by being in the United States today, we're all in the same boat now. It doesn't matter where you came from, whether you just arrived or you've been here and your family came over on the Mayflower or your family came over on the Amistad. We all are here together, and it's a problem as a country that we face. So we all have to work together to come up with a solution. And so what are we going to talk about today? Our agenda has 3 components. So first, we're going to talk about the work of the task force and put that in context. So what does it mean? And then what actually have we done since the last time we were here? Then the all-important question, why support the task force recommendations? And then we'll open it up to Q&A. I do appreciate we have some other speakers that are coming behind us, so we will be expeditious but still thoughtful in the presentation to you. Our presentation today is talking about the pursuit of justice at bottom. And this aligns with our association purpose. It is grounded in our association bylaws. And as you can see, we've outlined 3 aspects of our bylaws that connect directly to the work that we're doing today. So first, promote reform in the law. Second, facilitate the administration of justice. And then lastly, apply its knowledge and experience, or our knowledge and experience as was on the task force, to the field of law to promote the public good. Now let's talk more specifically about what the mission of our task force was. So some of you were here when we did this presentation initially, and some of you are new to the House. So to level set, we wanted to just make sure everyone understood what our work was. So that work was 3 components. So first, our past president, Andrew Brown, gave us a pretty weighty task. And Lily and I said, are we going to really be able to get this done in a year? Well, we're here, and it's a year and a half, so we tried. But it did take more time for us to be thoughtful and take in all the feedback that we obtained in order to do these 3 things. 1, examine how structural racism permeates and influences facets of daily life, leading to injustices, which are outlined in our report, as well as inequality for New Yorkers. The second was, how are we going to do that? So we had 6 committees, which Lillian will talk about in a moment, that examined key issues and causes around structural racism that allow it to be entrenched and persistent in our society. And then lastly, through these committees, we are exploring changes in the law and public policy and delivering a recommendation that incorporates that allows us to attack structural racism and effect meaningful societal change. So the areas of focus, I will turn this over to Lillian to talk a little bit more about our 6 areas.
Yep, we had 6 great committees, and a shout out to some of the leadership, as Taya noted, who are with us in the room. Vivian Wesson, who was one of the co-chairs of Environmental Justice. Is Mirna Santiago here now? She was...
There she is.
Oh, hey, you. I wasn't sure you were here because you'd been very quiet so far. So, you know. Mirna co-chaired Economic Opportunities. Health, I think Mishka Woodley is here today. Hey, Mishka. And Criminal Justice, I don't think the co-chairs of Criminal Justice are in the House today. Education, that's Claire and Nelson. Neither of them are yet members of the House, although that would be a good idea for you, Dick. And finally, housing. Oliver is here, trying to, fade in the background. But housing was a very raucous subcommittee. They all were, because we had substantive experts and we had advocates who were passionate about our mission. And we started and continued hearing from experts in every area that we studied. We led with Professor Paula Johnson from the Syracuse College of Law, and she gave us her definition of structural racism. It is a system of laws, policies, and institutional practices that produce and perpetuate racial inequities and inequality in this state. And that we led with that. This is me. You made us work so hard because you looked at the reports that we presented to you. In the first year, we did a lot of work implementing, understanding the task force mission. We built our teams and committees. We did research. We held public forums. We heard from substantive experts. We circulated our first draft report for feedback, and we held a number of informational sessions. In the next quarter, we reviewed your feedback and we responded to it. And we tailored this final version of the report to show how our recommendations are tailored to what we learned about structural racism in our state. And we also understood how the various recommendations across substantive areas were actually very interconnected. We heard your feedback that maybe 40 was too many recommendations. And so we prioritized and we recognized connections and we put those up front in our 12 final recommendations to you. And we really tried to focus on what we as lawyers can do about ending structural racism in New York. Hey, Glenn, I didn't see you before. How are you? Sorry. Okay. We were, in the next quarter, we restructured the report again. Taya and others drafted the awesome history section that I hope you read. What did you say, Dick? Just read the first 66 pages. No.
That was Andrew.
Oh, where's Andrew? I'm sorry, Andrew. Andrew said, as long as you read up to page 66, you're in good shape for today. That's the history section, right? It's why we were doing the work and why we chose our recommendations. And again, we were asked during the last informational session, what can lawyers do about structural racism in New York? And so that's what we focused on, and our menu of recommendations lays out what we as lawyers can do to begin to really attack racism and social inequity.
So why support the recommendation? So we have a few reasons that are outlined, and these are some things that we're going to flesh out a little bit more in the 11 minutes that we have remaining, Lillian.
I have no idea what she's talking about.
So the first is responding to some feedback that we had received. Is this really an issue related to the law? The history section shows that it's laws, policies, and practices, all of those things combined have created racial inequities and inequality in our society writ large as well as in New York. And that these inequalities, as you read through the 66 pages, and I am going to highlight some aspects of it if you did not get a chance to read them all, it's become embedded in how our various institutions across the state function to the detriment of communities of color. So that is the past. But what we continue to see, somebody say, well, that's the past. But the present, current data shows that the impact of racial inequities and inequality of these laws continue to be felt. These recommendations, as Lillian said, are tailored to address the issues that will mitigate these inequalities and inequities. And our recommendations are within the purview of the association's work. So now we'll talk a little bit about, and I'll give a quick history overview of how did we get here, right? I think that's the question that a lot of you had when we first presented this report. We saw the recommendations, but how did we get here? And does this even really apply to New York? So we'll start with slavery. I'm sure many of you are aware that slavery was created by law. But there are certain aspects of what happened in slavery that created the foundation to where we are today. So that would be slave codes. You can find that on page 10 to 11 or 182 to 183 if you're looking at the entire report. There was emancipation for slaves in New York, which was earlier than in the South, but it was gradual. And then once it became final, and again, it was only for men because women could not vote until much later, there was a property requirement that very few black people could meet. Moving forward into 1827 to 1937, we have some additional laws that created what is more the foundation of how we got here today. Although there were Civil War amendments passed 13th, 14th, and 15th that allowed for the freeing of slaves, as well as putting in place their rights, ensuring that they were citizens and that they had rights to participate fully as citizens. Congress passed a law, the Civil Rights Law, that was enabling regulation in 1875 for many of these, for these amendments. However, the Supreme Court undercut those things. They undercut the amendments, and they found the Civil Rights Law that the Congress had passed to be unconstitutional. If you take a look on pages 21 to 22 in the materials, 193 to 194, you will see how this was done. But I will highlight New York's role in this. New York had a test case to see whether New York was going to follow what was in the enabling regulation. Unfortunately, New York did not. That became a part of a range of cases called the civil rights cases that are, again, on page 21 to 22. The Supreme Court found that private actions were not covered by the Civil War amendments. And they also found that the civil rights laws were unconstitutional that Congress had passed. Next, going to Plessy versus Ferguson, which many of us are familiar with. In support of the proposition that separate is equal, they cited a New York case, People XL Rel King v. Gallagher, which was an education case, an early integration case. And so I just want to quote very quickly from that. As the Court of Appeals of New York in People v. Gallagher, and this is in the Plessy versus Ferguson case, this end cannot be accomplished nor promoted, meaning bringing the races together, which conflict with the general sentiment of the community upon whom they are designed to operate. If one race be inferior to the other socially, the Constitution of the United States cannot put them into the same place. This allowed for separate but equal, for segregation to happen. And it also allowed it to happen basically under the color of law, in education, in health, in housing, and in various other aspects of life that African Americans had to face on a daily basis. Between 1938 and 1964, there was a temporary commission that New York itself set up in order to deal with concerns raised with conditions affecting the colored population. And they made certain legal recommendations as well as legislative proposals. Although those things were in place, in order to enforce the law, it still fell short. In addition to that, the federal law continued to create and perpetuate separate but equal. As it relates to economic opportunity and employment, The Social Security Act and the National Labor Relations Act both excluded professions that were predominantly occupied, because those were the only things that black people could do, relating to agricultural work as well as domestic work. So Social Security, you were not able to take out money from that in order to participate in the Social Security fund, as well as with the NLRA. If you had a dispute with your manager or with your boss, you had no recourse. And you can find that on page 36 to 208. Federal law. Housing federal agencies enabled segregation in housing through a practice which I think many of us are familiar with, known as redlining. So that's just the highlights. We go into a lot more detail to explain how the law created the situation we are in today, how our institutions have embedded this in how they work, and we see in current state how those conditions continue to exist. If you look at page 45 to 46, you see it in housing as it relates to lower values for housing for blacks, as well as segregated areas that still exist and persist in our state. You see it with the criminal justice system, page 55 to 56. Education, 56 to 59, under-resourced schools and performance gaps. Health, environmental justice. And today, we heard our ABA president talk about the continuing existence of structural racism and the harmful effects. Not just that there are wealth gaps, not just that people aren't able to be successful and succeed. It erodes confidence and trust in our institutions, that these institutions will actually serve all of our citizens in this state. So, Lillian, I know we only have 4 minutes left, Dick. We're working.
Are you kidding? So we came up with recommendations that responded squarely to the history and the embedding of structural racism in our state. First, we got to measure the problem. We have to gather data in a more consistent way, especially in the fields of health, education, criminal justice, credit. We want to measure the problem accurately. Second, we recommend training for professionals across different substantive areas. We already know and face and comply with our 1 credit, at least, of DEI here in New York. Similar kinds of implicit bias training in order to decrease the negative impact of bias in the provision of health care, education, housing, and criminal justice. We'll talk a little bit in more detail about our recommendations that we gather facts and discuss remedies with respect to the race-based wealth gap and the need for equitable educational funding, in particular to reach children of color in New York. We propose some new or modified rules and laws in juries designed to increase the people of color serving in our jury pools by making changes to things such as the geographic boundaries of jury pools, citywide versus countywide, juror pay, increasing time, mandating time for voir dire, and a more objective test for peremptory challenges. We want to and recommend that we design rules that will affect the disproportionate discipline accorded to children of color in our schools. We make some specific recommendations for increased funding for universal child care, because 64% of New Yorkers live in child care deserts where no adequate child care is available. This impacts especially women of color with children under the age of 6. And we recommend increasing access to capital, especially for businesses owned by people of color. We recommend increasing accountability, in particular for landlords of multi-unit housing, in order to enforce lead standards for safe drinking water, and to ensure that local government agencies charged with enforcement of environmental regulations make sure that they're doing their job and encouraging them to tie in to community spokespeople. We wanted to focus in particular for a moment on 2 of our recommendations about which we've gotten the most questions, and you've already seen, I think, the amendment we entered into yesterday in order to respond again to comments from some of our leaders and to help everyone to support the task force report. we recommend that we support creation of a wealth gap or income gap commission. Yesterday, at the end of the executive committee meeting, the man who was doing our audiovisual work heard all about the history of structural racism and the ongoing impact on the lack of economic opportunities, the challenges of gaining a higher education, and the limited housing opportunities. And he told us that he was moved to tears hearing what in so many ways was his own story of the challenges he had as an immigrant from the Dominican Republic and his wife had as a person who grew up in the projects in the Bronx. Okay, in the Bronx. He said it, not me, to my friend in the Bronx. It was really moving and great to see how the community and our neighbors will see what we as lawyers are doing to study the harm done to a group of New Yorkers as the result of structural racism and to recommend the possible remedies that New York might undertake. We see this effort as very similar to the work we did on marriage equality, studying it, seeing the impact, concluding that legal change was necessary, and ultimately advocating for a legal change needed to correct a burning civil rights issue. The other area where we recommended the commencement or the establishment of a commission is with respect to equitable educational funding. New York is 48th in the nation when it comes to educational equity funding. That is comparing the amount of dollars that communities who serve more children living in poverty to those serving people with higher income. We need to establish a commission in order to provide the factual underpinning in order to implement the Court of Appeals decisions in cases like the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. And so that's how we see the commission's work. And we see that all of our recommendations really are designed to help fulfill our purpose as an association. Our committees included substantive law experts. We talked to others. We think that we understand that policy leads to creation of law, and law influences policy creation and enforcement. We say to you that our recommendations are based on our collective knowledge and experience of how law, policy, fact are married. And we urge you not to shrink from controversy on issues affecting our profession and the very administration of justice.
The last bullet that's on this slide is actually from a report that was done in early 2000 that addressed what should be our legislative advocacy. There had been some concerns and just wanting to understand what was our purview. And quoting from this report, just want to find the right place, it said, in the future, in talking about resolutions that go before our legislative body in New York, we should weigh the potential good it may do against the cost to association relationships with legislators. The further we stray away from our core issues, the less likely we are to be effective, and the more likely we are to inflict unnecessary damage on our ability to advocate for those issues which do matter to us. On the other hand, we should not shrink from controversy or issues affecting the profession and the administration of justice, because those areas are within our knowledge and expertise, and we have a duty to speak out and the right to be heard. So this report, in total, is about how we use the law to serve the public good. How do we use the law to address a wrong, to restore confidence that has been eroded? And how do we pursue and attain the appropriate administration of justice? Thank you. I want to highlight, and I think it was on the slide and I skipped it because I couldn't find it by accident. Lillian made reference to a change that was a part of the discussion at the executive committee yesterday to the report. So on page 80, where we talk about the Wealth Commission, there we go, thank you. So this was the language, so it has been modified. So I know some of you may have had a concern about how that was phrased. So this is the compromise that we reached. in order to make sure that everyone's voices were heard and everyone's concerns were addressed. But still, the issue around the wealth gap, which was very important to the members of the task force, as well as something that, as you can see from our report, is a continuing, persistent, entrenched issue, would allow us to address it and gather those facts to figure out the right appropriate legal remedies to correct it. Dick?
Thank you very much. So Taya, as a member of this body, would you like to move the report?
Yes, I would move that this body adopts the recommendations that are outlined in the report on the Task Force of Racism, Social Equity, and the Law.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. We're going to open this up for discussion. We want you to know, first of all, that this task force report was endorsed by the executive, as amended, was endorsed by the executive committee yesterday for favorable action by this House. So our first commenter would be past President Sharon Stern-Gersman.
Hi, Sharon Stern-Gersman. I have a question. I just want a clarification that this language on the screen replaces the entire bullet, so
Correct.
that there's no longer any reference to the pending legislation. Is
That's
that
correct.
Okay, thank you very much. And I really, really want to commend the encyclopedic amount of work that this commission has done and how unbelievably responsive you have been to every concern and every question that has been raised at all of the meetings along the way. And I think that this final compromise was necessary, was right, and I'll be very happy to vote yes, to screen yes in support of this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon.
Before I call on past President Brown, I just want to mention that I was in the hallway when the gentleman that you referred to, Lillian, came out, and it was really rather touching. So, past President Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, honorable body. Andrew Brown, immediate past chair, or past president of the association. I want to first commend Lillian and Taya for taking on this task. I had the opportunity and the authority as president to create the task force and select the chairs. Thank you for the incredible work that you did in leading the team to this point. I also want to thank the members of your task force and all those who contributed, many in this room. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to demonstrate as an association who we are as lawyers and what we stand for. There was a question put to us early in the presentation: why should we as lawyers take this on? There was also a reference to the first 66 pages of the report, and that was attributed to me from a comment yesterday. And I own it. And I think those pages are vitally important to understanding where we are today in our society, how we got here, and why these types of recommendations are so important, essential to moving us forward. If you haven't read the report, I ask you, I urge you, I plead that you go back and read the first 66 pages of this report. It is essential. When you get to the end of those 66 pages, you're saying, wow, now I have a better understanding of how we got here, and I have a better understanding how the law has played such a vital role in getting us here in the United States and here in New York State. And you see why it is that we have to do something as lawyers. When we talk about injustices and inequities, who better to talk about that? And who better to talk about how to change that than lawyers? I would submit that if we can't embrace opportunities to talk about injustices and inequities, that by itself raises questions of worthiness of us as lawyers to even wear the title. This is a vital opportunity. It allows us to get out front, stand for something important. And I know my time is running down. I would love to stand here and say so much more, but let me close with this. And this is actually taken from the report itself. I believe it's the last two sentences in the report, in the conclusion. and it says it succinctly and beautifully. This report is the light to see the inequities. And now that these inequities have been exposed, this report provides recommendations to undo them. We urge the association to light the way for New York to own up to and use the law to dismantle these structural inequities. That's wonderfully stated. That calls upon us to do something, and I suggest that it would be wise to do it as an association, not simply for black people and people of color, but for all of us. Because when we talk about injustices and inequities, it's never for those who are on the unfortunate end of that. It affects all of us as a society. Thank you. I ask that you all join me in endorsing and adopting this report.
Thank you, Andrews. Hermes Fernandez.
Hermes Fernandez, a delegate from the 3rd District. Congratulations on this excellent report. I fully support it. We'll vote in favor of it. I urge that we all do. I have the mildest of comment, which is, given in a report like this, in the breadth of the report, the scope of the report, I think we would be better served in future reports if our recommendations spoke more to principles that the Bar Association should support rather than specific legislative remedies. For example, the 6th recommendation calling for a Office of Financial Inclusion and Empowerment, which is an idea I support, some legislation I would support, but it's also not a new idea. It's something that has been around in one form or another for many years. I remember more than 30 years ago when there was discussions about allowing portions of money for, essentially welfare money, people on public need, public assistance, to be able to receive monies to begin their own businesses. So essentially grants, right? And there are things like that available today, and they're already in the state budget. In those days, that proposal was quickly called Bucks for Bums, right? And when it received that title, it was also dead, right? Because it was so easily just captured by its opponents. I think if we talk about principles as opposed to simply something as specific as that, we will actually have in better position to push the cause of justice forward. But again, that is simply a mild statement. I don't mean it as a criticism of this report. I think the report is wonderful, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Hermes.
Thank you.
Treasurer Designate Susan Harper.
Hi, Susan Harper, the Women in Law Section. I want to thank you for all your hard work on this. With Martin Luther King Day just happening just recently, there was so much on the news for all of us to be thinking about. One statement that I heard that really stuck with me was the fact that this is a time that we should be thinking about truth and reconciliation, and just dealing with, as it was spoken, about the injustices that have occurred. So much has occurred in our country that has really pushed back individuals and families. We hear, just now I'm going to talk on a financial basis, we hear all the time about, if you invest in a certain time period, how your money grows, and then that money can go over to those who can inherit it. And it's very important that we take these steps to address these inequities and address these issues. It's time, and we need to just show our leadership in this area. And I really want to commend this task force for this amazing work that you have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Winnie?
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Edwina Martin. I'm an elected delegate from the 13th Judicial District. I'm also an immediate past president of the President's Committee, past chair, co-chair of the President's Committee on Access to Justice. And I'm so pleased to stand in support of this excellent report. Congratulations to all the task force members and to you, Lillian and Taya. I will note that the PCAJ did vote in support of this excellent report. It's close to my heart for many reasons, because I'm a woman of color in the United States, but also my family has a close connection to the fight for access to justice in this arena. Just really quickly, my great-great-uncle George L. Vaughn, who's the son of former slaves, along with Thurgood Marshall, represented J.D. Shelley and Herman Willer in the landmark civil rights case Shelley v. Kramer in 1948, which, as many of you know, the United States Supreme Court ruled that state courts could not enforce racially restrictive covenants because they violated the 14th Amendment. So this was part of a body of litigation to address housing discrimination and hopefully end segregation. But because people of color, particularly African Americans and Latinos, were really left out of a lot of federal programs that were created in the 19th and 20th centuries to help build home ownership and create a base of wealth, the segregation continues on a de facto basis at almost the same level as when my great-great-uncle argued that case in the U.S. Supreme Court in 1948. These are the structural things that we must address as an association, as a state, as a country, as a people, if we really are going to move the dial and address the structural issues that are causing these equities to continue and perpetuate. And I personally believe the more specific we can be in our recommendations, the better. Principles are, of course, wonderful, and we all know the principles of our association, but this is also a time for firm action and no equivocation. So thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Are there any further comments from the floor? Lillian or Taya, would you like to say anything further?
I want to thank the task force members, some of whom are here in the room and some who may be streaming. When we originally spoke to all of you, we said this was going to be a year. And when we got to the year point, we asked, would you be willing to stay? And everyone did. We wouldn't be able to accomplish this without the work that all of you did. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, and one other thing. Thank you, Tom. You've been a great support for our work, helping us to find documents. I asked him if he could go and find me a law or some report from like 1938, and he found it, and he was able to send it to me via email. So thank you so much for your support in helping this to be possible.
Thank you, Taya. And Lillian, I would be shocked if you didn't want the last word.
I'm good, Dick. I'm good. Just, you know how to do, you know what to do. Now just do it.
There being no further comments, I would call for a vote. And by the way, I think it's important to know, I don't know if I've said this already, that this motion has been endorsed for favorable action by the Executive Committee at yesterday's meeting. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations. Jingle bells. So our next presenter is going to be walking through the door any minute, I hope, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip to the 10th item on the agenda, which is the administrative agenda. And there's just a couple of things here. Firstly, at the April 1 meeting, you will be requested to elect 6 NYSBA delegates to the ABA House of Delegates. The New York State Bar Association has a total of 11 delegates, but they serve staggered terms, so only 5 positions are to be filled in April. If elected, the candidates will serve for a 2-year term commencing at the conclusion of the ABA's annual meeting in August. Our bylaws require that the names of the candidates be announced at the House meeting immediately preceding that at which the election will take place. So the nominees are as follows: Claire Gutekunst, Michael Miller, Scott Carson, Sherry Levin Wallach, and Dominic Napolitano. The bylaws further require that the names of the members at large of the nominating committee be announced at this meeting of the House, and those members will be Scott M. Carson, who will be the chair, Henry M. Greenberg, T. Andrew Brown, and Michael Miller as an alternate. I want to also indicate that we will be, I'm stalling, waiting for our next presenter, that we will be meeting again in Albany in a hybrid meeting on Saturday, April 1st, 2023. We're hoping as many of you as possible will actually be in person at the Bar Center. I want to tell you that I went to a tax luncheon yesterday. There were about 850 people there. The membership, I think, is delighted to be in person, and I can tell you that I'm delighted to see people without a screen in front of my face. That's all I can stall. I don't know where Dana is. Well, you're going to comment on the administrative items?
Actually, I saw that new business is one of the agenda items.
Please introduce yourself first.
Yes, Craig Buckeye, representing Bar Association of Erie County. I saw that new business is lumped in along with administrative items, and since we're stalling, one question I did just want to raise.
Excuse me, just
yes.
Let me say one thing. The rules of the House under Rule 3C indicate that if there's going to be new business introduced, it has to be introduced, or we have to be advised by the Wednesday prior to the meeting. We haven't received any of that any notice at that time. But if you want to make a comment, we're happy to hear it under the circumstances.
Well, simply a comment and a point of information. Is the Bar Association planning or contemplating any statement or policy position concerning what happened on Wednesday with respect to the hearing, and I say that in quotes, concerning the nominee to the New York Court of Appeals for Chief Judge?
And we have, and in the President's report, Sherry indicated what policy has been adopted and what has been sent out for publication. And I can't recite it, exactly, but basically, the goal is to study some of the subtleties of what transpired. It wasn't very subtle, I guess, but some of the subtleties of the Constitution that were not looked at before. Let me read it to you. Resolution to form a committee on the selection of judges for the Court of Appeals. It is resolved that the New York State Bar Association Executive Committee approves the appointment of a special committee on the selection of judges for the Court of Appeals in response to the concerns raised in recent weeks over the appointment of a chief judge. The committee will examine the selection process, including its history, and make recommendations to the association. The Executive Committee reaffirms that the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary are crucial to the administration of justice. It is of the utmost importance to public confidence that there is a fair process that allows the judiciary to operate independently and effectively. So that is what was adopted yesterday by the Executive Committee, and it is our intent to act extremely rapidly on this. We don't expect this to be an open issue for months on end. With that having been said, I see that Dana Syracuse is here, and he will be doing a presentation on the from the task force on the emerging digital finance and currency. So, Dana. And Dana, I apologize, at the last meeting I had to cut you off.
Perfectly fine, and sorry for being a few minutes late. I guess, running early, running late, can't really time these things. So wonderful to be here with everybody. Since we last spoke in the fall, there's been much activity in the digital asset and Web3 space. The mission of the task force remains strong, with three core components. One, to develop and educate members on best practices for attorneys representing clients in the digital finance and digital currency matters, study and evaluate the legal issues and questions surrounding the expansion and regulation of digital finance and digital currency industries in New York, and promote appropriate use of digital assets and Web3 resources to keep pace with industry and expand global membership. To that end, since we last met, we held a panel in December that was very well attended. We have put together an interim report discussing digital assets and discussing digital asset use and impact on the legal market. And tomorrow, I hope everyone can attend, we have another panel which I hope will be well attended, focusing on Web3 and Web3 use cases. One thing I think is really important for the House to think about as you're considering the space is moving beyond the froth, moving beyond a lot of the bankruptcy issues that we're reading about recently, and really dig into understanding Web3, to understanding blockchain technology, to understand the way that is going to continue to impact the practice of law and impact the legal issues that go in front of our attorneys. To that end, we are going to continue to focus on education. My co-chair and I, Jackie Druhan, have been discussing putting together a substantive panel later on in the spring to continue the focus on education, because one thing that's really significant is this idea that blockchain Web3, it is not it's not an area of the law in and of itself, but it's one that impacts other substantive legal areas. So, if you are a lawyer in the bankruptcy space, in the tax space, in the IP space, knowing your substantive area, but also understanding the technology and understanding things like tokenization of goods will be important in your overall practice. The other area where I think we want to continue focusing is in legislative affairs. It is, I think, important that the state bar can and should remain active in the various legislative proposals that exist out there. To that end, excuse me, we'll be putting together a legislative proposal focusing on good corporate governance in the space, as well as financial controls, auditing, and oversight, and we'll be discussing that and submitting that. Look forward to continuing to update this body as the work of the task force develops. Thank you.
Wow. Are there any questions? No questions. This is for informational purposes only at this point. And we appreciate your report. Thank you. We have been worried about the timing of this program for, I don't know, a month or so. And we were worried for a while about the quorum. And I'm very happy to say that not only did we get a quorum, and not only did we accomplish what we wanted to accomplish, but it's 12:02, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Anyone abstaining? We are adjourned. Thank you all for being here.